Go ahead, Lori. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Hi. Thanks for inviting me. This is Lori Spencer. I'm a volunteer recruiter for the Kennedy 24 campaign and longtime supporter of Bobby's. Been trying to draft him to run for president since 2007, believe it or not. So this is a long-held dream come true that he's finally running. I'm also a JFK historian. I've spent more than 40 years of my life researching the Kennedy presidency, the Cold War, and the Kennedy assassination. The assassinations of both Kennedy brothers, actually, Bobby's father as well. And I'm a journalist, been working in radio mostly and print journalism for more than 35 years. Currently co-hosting Maverick News with Rick Walker, and I host a podcast called Strange Bedfellows, which I think is perfect for RFK Jr. because he is the Strange Bedfellows candidate. He's the guy who's finally able to bring together Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, progressives, socialists, even communists. He has an amazing way of uniting people, and I think that's what our country needs right now. So that's why I'm totally committed to going all the way with RFK. Hi, Matthew. Good to see you here.
I love that.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you. Jim, we'll start with you to start out to kick off the conversation. Who's your pick? And if you want to say, and why?
Well, Trump's my pick, but my whole approach to things is I try to be more objective about it. I very loosely can be regarded as Republican, although quite frustrated with the party for years that I've worked in and around. So just to handicap this thing, what seems to be emerging in my mind is Donald Trump has a pretty clear path to the nomination. I'm surprised that DeSantis was not more competitive, and there's really, in my estimation, no path for him to be more competitive. Everybody else, all the other candidates, two of whom I have known personally in a friendly manner, Mike Pence and Tim Scott. Well, Mike just really messed himself up badly at that family leader event that Tucker Carlson was hosting on Friday. Tim Scott's kind of still going to be around, and he's a really good guy. And I lived in South Carolina for a little while, and we would both be on the plane flying up to D.C. when he was a congressman and not a senator, and spent a lot of time conversing with him. Good guy. Vivek Ramaswamy seems very interesting and energetic. RFK is, as others have said, really striking a nerve, and I think for a lot of people, and in the manner in which it was described. He kind of cuts across all boundaries. I do like him. I've always had respect for him. But Bernie Sanders had a lot more behind him, and they squashed his nomination. They're working hard to do the same thing. It would be nice to see him be able to be more competitive because he represents a Democrat Party that hasn't existed, at least on the leadership level, for a few decades now, at least two. And that is actually a breath of fresh air, to be candid, for our political process, because both parties have really gone downhill. So, but I'm sticking with Donald Trump. That's going to be offensive to some people, I know. I'm not worried about that. I just think that he's going to be the best for the country, and the one. And actually, I did an analysis recently of polling. A lot of people don't recognize that Donald Trump actually really is in the lead everywhere for the GOP nomination, and surprisingly, for the general election in polls here. Now, of course, there's a lot of time between now and next November, and I grant that. But it surprises me that he's doing as well as he is. So that's kind of my lay of the land.
How much weight are you putting on polls right now? It's so early. The polls can change. There's always that October surprise. So how much weight do you really put on polling right now, Jim?
Well, I typically don't put a whole lot of weight at all on polls in the odd year leading up to a presidential election. But What's very interesting is I think the opinion of Americans is generally coalescing around the fact that this is going to be a Biden-Trump rematch, and there's some question about that in the population, but that's kind of what people are thinking. And by the way, this is with all due respect to RFK. I'm not saying he's not energetic and capable and whatever. I'm saying objectively what I see in polls people are perceiving. So because you asked me to do that. So because that right at the present time is what people believe is going to happen, then I give a little bit more weight to these polls now. What is surprising also in this is that after Jack Smith's indictment at the federal level, that these polls are still at this level. And I think that is significant. The two that really blow my mind is that Biden and Trump are running neck and neck in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Now, I might have expected that in Pennsylvania. I would never have expected it in Michigan. And so it's, again, there's a lot of water to pass under the bridge between now and November. But I've been handicapping these things for 30 years. And the sense I'm getting is that this is going to be a very interesting race. And unless there is a black swan event against Trump or RFK, which I do hope happens, RFK can gain some ground and push the Democrat nomination in a certain direction. That's where we're headed. And I think that roughly is the state of affairs as it exists right now. Sorry for the long response on that.
No, you're fine. Matthew, you were throwing some thumbs down. What do you think? Do you think that that Jim is correct, that RFK has quite a bit of ground to make up in order to beat Biden for the nomination?
Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is already the front runner by landslide margins against both Biden and Trump in favorability ratings. And after I'm done talking here, I will throw a tweet up so you guys can see this.
I think you're having some mic problems.
Sorry, did you hear what I said about did my
No.
comment about the okay? So I'm sorry. RFK Jr. is already ahead by landslide margins against both Biden and Trump in favorability ratings. He's literally 40% ahead of Trump and Biden in favorability ratings, according to a recent Economist YouGov poll. And there are a lot of voters out there who just don't know about him yet. You know, when I do person on the street interviews and I talk, like, people aren't very familiar with Bobby, but those who are familiar are extremely favorable towards him. And so I think he is going to shock everybody. He's going to win the Democratic nomination and he's going to beat Trump in a rout. And I'm going to tell you two specific topics where Bobby has a massive advantage against Biden, which is war and censorship. When Biden ran in 2020, arming a proxy war against Russia that risks nuclear war was not on the ballot. No one voted for this proxy war. Furthermore, no one voted for a systemic program implemented intentionally by Biden, okay, with the CIA and the FBI to illegally and unconstitutionally censor free speech and shred the First Amendment, which Biden has done. Bobby and a number of other parties sued the Biden administration and won in court. And we had a judge in Missouri declare that the entire Biden censorship program, which involves taking down posts about the 2020 election, taking down posts questioning the COVID narrative, and a lot of other topics, and specifically targeting Mr. Kennedy, that whole program was illegal. Okay, so on those two topics, again, this is the key point. No one voted for those programs either in the Democratic primary of 2020 or in the general election. So the contrasts that Mr. Kennedy are going to be able to create are going to be phenomenal against Biden. You know, a couple other things I'll throw in there: freeing Julian Assange, and this is something that both Biden and Trump are vulnerable on. Trump claims that he wanted to drain the swamp and go against a national security state. Well, why didn't he free Julian Assange, who is the great truth-telling journalist who exposed the Iraq war crimes, right? He didn't do that. And Biden certainly, is targeting journalists like him. So, and the other thing I want to just bring up, which is a bit of a hobby horse for both myself and Mr. Kennedy, I believe. And by the way, I don't speak for Mr. Kennedy, even though I run this podcast called RFK All the Way, but it's an independent podcast. But the truth about the JFK assassination, and that's something Biden and Trump are both vulnerable on. Trump was supposed to, by law, release the records on the JFK assassination. He promised he would, and then he caved because the CIA threatened him. Biden just permanently blacked out the JFK assassination records. If we don't replace Biden, we'll never see what's in those records. But Mr. Kennedy is not afraid of the CIA because he knows the fact that the CIA killed his uncle, killed his father, and he knows that we need to have healing and transparency, and we need a major, major overhaul and a true draining of the swamp. Trump promised he was going to drain the swamp. He didn't do it. He already had his chance. So this is why Mr. Kennedy has these favorability ratings. It's because people know he's a truth teller. He's not afraid to speak truth to power, and he's a statesman. He's someone, when you look at Mr. Kennedy, at Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's someone who can be a role model to your kids. So, I'd love to turn it over to Lori, actually, if we're going to keep talking about Mr. Kennedy, because she has a lot to say, but those are some of my main points. Why?
Thank you.
I'd like to say a couple of things before we move on.
Yeah, go ahead,
Sphinx.
Lori, I'll have you go after we get to Charles, who's had his hand up, but go ahead, Sphinx.
Yeah. Is that based on one poll? Is that based on, you said you were going to post that? Please do.
It's multiple polls. There are multiple polls that have showed Mr. Kennedy vastly ahead in terms of favorability.
Okay. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I was asking a question. So if you don't mind posting that and not interrupt me when I'm speaking. So what I wanted to say was, I agree that he's very likable. In fact, I had dinner last night, and very conservative Republicans were saying about how much they like him. Okay, I've heard the same with my Democrat friends when I've broken bread with them. I will say, in this climate, I don't think someone who appeals to maybe even common sense isn't the way in this climate. Sadly, I wish it was, but I don't see it. And it seems like some of the things that he has said, and recently, and I know that you tweeted about this as well, but the claim he made about COVID, now I went over what he said about it being ethnically targeted. And there's a flaw in what he said, and I understand his retraction, semi-retraction, saying that he didn't mean it that way. However, he said it was targeted. Targeted doesn't mean it can be or can't be. It means it was intended. Targeted implies intention. So I would advise him to be more forthcoming. Not that he's not trying to be, but when these things happen, we always tell candidates, if you make a mistake or speak or say something, be very careful with how you retract that, because that's going to make the difference, not what you initially said, because everybody slips up. So when I heard that, he never said that, he said it could have been, sort of thing, but it wasn't necessarily. I went back to the language. I said, no. He said it was targeted. It was ethnically targeted. That means there was intention. So I just want to say this favorability rating, I'm curious to see what it is. I'm curious to know how many polls there are. And just being a former statistics student, I know that you can't, sometimes these polls don't really mean very much. However, the people I've talked to do really like the guy, irrespective of which side of the aisle they're on. Thanks.
Thanks. Let's go to Charles. Go ahead, Charles.
Thank you. My I can accept what you're saying about favorability with RFK, but in such a restrictive two-party system where Joe Biden's an incumbent, the DNC has canceled the primaries debates. What I am curious is, how is RFK even logistically viable? I mean, he's not going to end up on the Democratic ticket unless something catastrophic happens in the Biden White House. And the other thing would be, RFK working with a Republican is basically a no-no. Pretty sure he's publicly stated that he is Democrat through and through. He won't be present on a Republican ticket. So I don't know if Matt or Lori, you guys have an answer for that. Just the logistics of the situation. Like, how does he overcome that? How does he overcome that gatekeeping of the Democratic Party?
That's a great question. Can I take that one?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, of course, I can't speak for Kennedy, and I don't think the campaign is going to want to disclose their strategy here. Bobby does feel confident that he can win the Democratic nomination. And I have to be honest with you, Charles, I share your skepticism. I used to be a Kennedy Democrat back in the 70s and the 80s. I left the party in the 1990s because I thought that the Clintons ruined it. And I've been a libertarian ever since. So this will be the first time in 30 years that I'll be changing my voter registration back to Democrat just to vote for Bobby, because I'm voting for the person, not the party. I know Bobby. I know he's a man of integrity. I know he'll keep his promises. That's why I'm all in. Now, I can give you my own strategy, what I would do if I were giving him advice. As a longtime Kennedy Democrat all the way back to 1980, when Ted Kennedy challenged President Carter, I was out campaigning for Ted Kennedy in that race. I'm old. I'm really old, guys. I would advise him to do, and also as a historian of his uncle Jack and how Jack won the nomination in 1960. You have to remember that prior to 1960, the Democratic Party nominees and the Republican Party nominees were always traditionally selected by fat cats in smoke-filled back rooms. The power brokers of the party selected the nominees, and that was pretty much always the way it was done. President Kennedy, Jack Kennedy, Senator Kennedy then, transformed the process. In 1960, he went out and actually campaigned hard in key primary states. And he won the votes and he won the primaries. Back then, presidential candidates didn't even bother to campaign in primary states, most of them. They didn't put any energy at all into primaries because they knew that the nominees would be selected at the convention by the power brokers. So that was when the process was transformed, and primaries have been important ever since 1960. However, the Democratic Party has changed a lot since then. Now they have superdelegates. Now the game is indeed very rigged. And we all saw what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. That's what Bobby has to overcome.
Hold on a second. No, actually, I was going to ask you, Lori, because you brought up a very good point. I was going to ask about Bernie Sanders. Given what happened with Bernie Sanders, what are your thoughts about how RFK can do? And you just brought him up, so I wanted to just not forget that. Thanks.
No, it's a great question. My personal feeling on it, and I'm a pretty good strategist, I think, there's only one way. There's only one path, and that's the primaries, and he's got to win, and he's got to win by huge margins, and he's got to bring the delegates. He's got to come to that convention with so many delegates that they cannot deny him the nomination, because if they do, there will be a riot on the convention floor. They will not be able to steal that nomination from him. That's how Jack Kennedy did it in 1960. Back then, the party power brokers did not want Jack Kennedy. They wanted anybody but JFK. JFK took the nomination with the votes. And that's the way Donald Trump did it in the Republican Party in 2016. I believe that Bobby Kennedy can do it again, but he can't do it without the votes. He's got to win these primaries. Matthew, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Lori. I actually just wanted to respond, because we didn't yet, to what Sphinx said about the COVID comments that Bobby made that became controversial. And I posted in the thread here his his response, right, in which he's targeting Gavin de Becker, the best-selling author of The Gift of Fear, who is a bar mitzvah Jew and whose grandfather escaped Poland, etc. So, speaking as an Ashkenazi Jew, he's kind of pointing out that the whole thing is an emotionally charged kind of smear campaign where they're trying to focus your attention on anything except the point, right? The point is that the U.S. has been actually developing ethnically targeted bioweapons. Like that's an actual program that's been going on. So, for anyone who is kind of curious about that thing, I strongly recommend that you look at Robert Kennedy's Twitter feed, look at some of the stuff he's been posting there. There are multiple debunks
Matthew,
of this. This is an actual issue.
Respectfully, he has been, what the conservatives love about RFK is his COVID stance. What the Democrats hate about RFK is his COVID stance. So he has been backing away from it. In fact, when he did his speech, when he was stating that he was going to be running for president of the United States, I didn't hear any COVID talk. And that is what made him polarizing to the conservatives to begin with. So why back away from something? Why, when obviously his remarks were putting him on the map? I'll let you answer briefly, and then we will go to Noah.
So, Sarah, with respect, what you said is not factually true. In his launch speech, the day he announced in April, he talked extensively about the COVID lockdowns and how misguided that policy was.
But he did not speak about how he feels about the vaccine. He backed away from all of that.
So what he is, he's aware that there's a higher level of heat and emotion for people, I think. This is just my speculation. So what he has said is he doesn't necessarily bring up the vaccine topic, but he's happy to respond to it when it comes up and when someone asks him about it. And he's now done probably something like 50 to 100 podcast interviews in the course of his campaign. And it's come up numerous times. Okay. And in fact, he wanted to debate Peter Hotez, right, who is the foremost champion of the current vaccine ideology, on Joe Rogan. And a number of people offered to literally donate money to charity just to have that debate happen, because we need that to have a healthy nation. To have a healthy and intellectually healthy nation, we need to have an honest, public, transparent debate where we explore the topic, we look at the facts, and we engage in it without the emotional charge, but like saying, well, what's real? Are these vaccines safe or not? Do we have the appropriate safety studies? He's been totally willing to debate that. And Peter Hotez is the one who backed down despite over $1 million offered in charity. So, and the question, and see, the thing is, the truth is not right or left. Can I just finish one last thing? The truth. I'm just going to finish. I just need 30 seconds. The truth is not right or left. The truth is not Democratic or Republican. The truth is something that we seek out because we care about the truth, and he is committed to truth telling in all areas. And that's what sets him apart from the entire Democratic field, is he's willing to tell the truth about things that are hard, that people don't want to hear. And that's how his uncle unified the country. That's why his father specifically, when he was running in the primaries, his whole strategy was, I'm going to tell the truth, even if you don't want to hear it. And he went from a total long shot that everyone said had no chance to he was on the verge of winning the primaries when the CIA assassinated him, and he united the country. His father, Robert Kennedy Sr., ran the most powerful presidential campaign in the history of this country that united people about race, across race lines, class lines, economic lines, because he was telling the truth. And that's what Bobby Kennedy Jr. is willing to do on these topics, is tell the truth even when people don't want to hear it.
We're going to circle back to that. Go ahead, Noah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm so glad I'm able to speak. Thank you, and thank you, RFK, all the way. Although we may have disagreements, I respect you very heavily and the candidate you choose to support. First off, I want to give my person that I'll be supporting. I'll be supporting Marianne Williamson. Before you start throwing onions and tomatoes at me, I want to give my reasons why. First off, thank you everybody previously who's spoken, and I have my reasoning as to why I will not support Kennedy. And Biden's been a good president, I'd say. He's been a good president. Um, Here's the thing, though. Marianne Williamson is different. Marianne Williamson is somebody who has chosen to speak on, chosen to speak on policy that nobody has had the courage to speak on. Kennedy, on the other hand, I would love another Kennedy in the White House. Don't get me wrong. Just the name Kennedy gives me very presidential. It gives me very presidential vibes. But here's the thing. I want a candidate who speaks about something else other than vaccinations. I haven't heard much else but his opinions on vaccinations. All I've seen is tweets about Robert F. Kennedy said this about vaccinations. This is why he's a bad guy. But I want to know why he is a good guy, and I want to hear more about him other than vaccination reasons. Now, I probably won't catch me supporting him at all anytime soon because he's heavily right leaning on he's right wing on a lot of vaccine issues, and I've even seen Republicans tweet Trump Kennedy 24 if needed. I'll pin the tweet up to the space, but
Can you pin it to
Yeah,
the
but
chat, please?
not to
Not
the
I
space, pin it to the chat. The Robert Kennedy Jr. has already stated that there would not be him on a Republican ticket. I believe RFK all the way already stated that, correct?
Yeah, Bobby Kennedy Jr. said in no uncertain terms, absolutely never would he run with Trump. Period. End of story. The whole thing is a psyop. The whole thing was created by a Trump affiliate actor who was trying to get people to believe in this so it would fling mud against Kennedy
It
and
was
diminish
Roger
him.
Stone.
Roger Stone, exactly. It was a Roger Stone psyop. It's total BS. It's not even worth acknowledging that idea. So, and I do really appreciate the question of like, well, what is good about Bobby, right?
Just
Why would
before
people
I let
support
you
him?
go, I wanted
No.
to address something. A couple of things. So we want to keep comments down to about 2 minutes. Just be mindful of that because we have people that do want to offer their own opinions. And I want to address the Marianne Williamson thing. The last I checked, she was polling at 0. If somebody has any other polls, I don't even think she's a blip on the radar. And not only just to address her very quickly, she has 0 qualifications, 0. Has absolutely no shot. If I would bet my house that she would never get the nomination. I think that's the one thing that we could all bet on. But I'll let you continue, Matthew. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. And no, I appreciate that question. It's like, you can be against things, but like, what are you for? And I think Bobby Kennedy, first of all, is for honest, accountable government. Okay. 22% of Americans today trust the government and believe the government is telling the truth. 22% of Americans believe the media is telling the truth. That is horrifying, right? 60 years ago, actually, people believed the government was telling the truth when John Kennedy was in the White House because we had an honest president. And it's been a descent into lie after lie after lie. We were lied into the Vietnam War. We were lied about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. We were lied into the Iraq War. We were told that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction and links to 9/11. We've been lied into the Ukraine war. We were told this was a humanitarian mission and it was unprovoked when in fact we provoked this war intentionally through NATO expansion. Bobby is going to put an end to the lies. He's going to start telling Americans the truth, even when it's hard. And that truth is going to be so healing and so liberating for Americans. So that's the first point. Free speech. The free speech will be defended under Bobby Kennedy's administration. Let's talk about the environment for a minute. Bobby Kennedy is a classic environmentalist. Whatever you want to say about climate change, people have different opinions about it. Bobby Kennedy's talking about our Purple Mountains majesty, our lakes, our rivers, our streams. We need to have a clean, healthy environment that's not totally polluted. And why is everything polluted right now? It's because the polluters are running the show. He calls this agency capture, the corrupt merger of state and corporate power, where the polluters are basically writing the laws at the EPA. So he's going to clean up our environment in a way. He's going to be an environmental president like we've never seen. I see Lori Spencer's hand up. Lori, you want to take the rest of this on why you support Bobby?
Just a moment.
I'd love to follow up
I
on
do
it.
want to. I want to go back to Jim really quickly because Jim, didn't Donald Trump run on free speech in 2020? Didn't he run on that in 2016? Wasn't he supposed to be the free speech candidate? What do you say to that?
Well, I think that it came to that over time as the Russia hoax thing was propagating itself. I think the major thing that Donald Trump has been successful at doing to build the following that he has had, and he even though he lost in 2020, he received more votes than any Republican incumbent ever, and it was a huge number of votes. Been able to gain a following because he's hitting right at the core of what Americans are frustrated most by, which is that we do have a government that's out of control. We've got a legal system that is targeting basically on the key issues, basically sides with one side of the aisle. And I think that the biggest thing is that he was fighting, and people want fighters. I was making the point that when Tucker Carlson was questioning all the presidential candidates in Iowa on Friday, that what Tucker exposed was that the Republican establishment, which is represented by most of the people in the Republican field right now, with the exception of Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump, are people who consult the consultants in D.C. and the pundits in D.C., but they don't consult what the American people really are thinking. It's why Republicans should be blowing away elections, because their stated beliefs are much closer to what the American people think. Now, RFK is doing that as well, and it's to his credit. It's why he has gained a following, because he's of the same ilk. He has a different approach. He does things a bit differently, but he is absolutely pointing out the very frustrations that the American people are feeling. So, I think Trump obviously is going to be fighting the deep state again if he were able to be elected president. I think Robert Kennedy would too. If either of them got in there, I think the American people would be very pleased. But right now, I think it's very hard for RFK to get past the Democrat rigged system that he's got to face. If he does, it would be a good thing for America, in my opinion.
Sphinx, I'm going to have you take over for about a minute while I work on some DMs. Go ahead.
Okay, Charles, let's go to you.
I mean, it's great. RFK is favorable. We all agree he's good for America. The real logistical question is, how does he overcome the DNC? I mean, the right? Are you banking? And this is not a sarcastic question. Are you banking on the death, an indictment of the Biden's family, a willful step down? I don't foresee that. What is the path? Truly, succinctly, is there a path really?
Does anybody want to answer that? Lori, you sort of, I asked a sort of similar question about Bernie, but if anyone wants to answer, go ahead, Lori.
Well, it's like I said, it's just going to take votes. When it gets right down to it, politics is a pretty simple game. You need the votes. Unfortunately, Bernie Sanders did not come to the Democratic convention in 2016 or 2020 with sufficient votes to win the nomination. And we know there was rigging going on, but when you have an overwhelming majority, they really can't deny you the nomination. But I did want to follow up on a couple of points that Matthew made and also Jim made about free speech, because it's going to be one of the key issues in 2024. And, Trump is really not bad on free speech. He talks a lot about it. In my opinion, he didn't do much about it. My biggest problem with Donald Trump on free speech is that he had Julian Assange arrested, and his DOJ prosecuted Julian Assange. He's the reason Julian Assange is behind bars today, even though he's been convicted of nothing. And Trump failed to pardon Julian Assange, and he had many occasions to do so. Also, on the question of censoring RFK Jr., which Matthew was talking about, I can tell you from my own experience that I had a YouTube channel for years where I just had a daily news program, never had any strikes, never had any videos removed. But as soon as Kennedy entered the race and I started talking about Kennedy and volunteering on his campaign, any video that I would post about RFK would either get removed or I would get a strike on my channel. And finally, they demonetized my channel and then they banned my channel simply for reporting on Kennedy's campaign, which is just stunning to me. And then right after that, YouTube started going after other creators as well, Kim Iverson, Luke Rudowski, Theo Vaughn, Mike Tyson, Jordan Peterson, Dark Journalist, the Indie News Network, Misty Winston. All of us have had strikes against our channels or have had our content removed just because we talked to or about RFK Jr. So that's all I wanted to say. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to bring up. The debate that you guys were talking about, the offer to debate Dr. Peter Hotez, $2.5 million was raised to be donated to charity if those guys will debate. And that money is still on the table. The offer is still open. And I hope that Dr. Hotez will reconsider because Kennedy would love to debate him.
Thank you.
But I don't know if we spoke about RFK that much because I wasn't here. But somebody that's not really, I didn't know too much about RFK. But the last week of some of the statements and comments that have come out from him have really disappointed me. And because I've been hearing, in some of the spaces, lots of support and saying that he might be somebody that might be different than Trump or DeSantis, but him coming out with some crazy theories about that the water that we drink is, turning our children into basically transgender and gay, and then coming out saying that the COVID vaccine basically was meant not to attack the Jews or the Chinese. I mean, it's starting to worry me about him and his conspiracy theories now.
I said,
Lev, if I could respond, I just wanted to correct one thing that you said. The comments that Kennedy made regarding COVID, he was not talking about the vaccines. He was talking about the virus itself being engineered as such to specifically, attack or infect certain ethnicities.
Yes, I'm sorry. You're 100% right. I meant the virus itself, not the vaccine. Even worse.
There you go. You're all good.
But I think
Lori, can I ask you a question about that? Sorry,
no, go
I
ahead.
just want to ask. Yeah, when I listened to that, one of the things that really bothered me was when he said, who's least susceptible is Ashkenazi Jews. I'm not saying this was his intention, but I am saying it's a big mistake if he doesn't do a better job at correcting himself, because that sounds like the whole Jews run the world kind of thing to me. And let me tell you, I've had not many, I know two personally, Jewish people who died. They didn't get the vaccine, and I'm not pro-vaccine, but and the ones that are doing well, most of them, they say they've gotten the vaccine. So that kind of thing is a little bit, it's conspiracy theory, but it's also kind of feeding into something else that even if it was inadvertent, I think it needs to be corrected, to be honest. And as a strategist, I don't know if you agree or not.
And before you answer, Lori, just to add to that, Sphinx, I know a lot of Jewish people. I'm Jewish myself, and I know a lot of Jewish people that got the COVID and had COVID and suffered very, very. So it makes no sense in these comments. Go ahead, Lori.
It is confusing, and of course, we just don't know. I mean, the answer is we don't know the truth about COVID yet. Bobby was quoting a study that's been done that, just points to that. We can't explain why it is. It's probably a step too far to assume that this virus was engineered in that way. I'm not sold on that. I can only speak from my own experience. I'm not Jewish. I caught COVID on January 13th, 2020, and the pneumonia almost killed me. Now, mind you, this is while the virus was still supposedly not even in the United States yet. American doctors had no idea what it was or how to treat it. They just diagnosed me as having a pneumonia of unknown origin, a viral pneumonia of unknown origin is what they called it. But I survived. I'm alive. But 3.5 years later, I still have debilitating long COVID. I'm unvaccinated. I never took the vaccine because long COVID causes myocarditis and inflammation of the brain and the lungs and all throughout the body. So my doctor advised me not to take the vaccine, fearing that it would exacerbate the inflammation that I already have. So I can tell you that I feel like I've been hit by a bioweapon. COVID did
But Lori,
something to me.
I do need to just interject one thing before I hand it back to you, because this is a flawed analysis. We don't confirm something by single examples. We can dispute something and prove a theory is false by one example, but the fact that you had an experience or I had a certain experience doesn't prove anything about it. So that we need to keep, be logical about that as well.
You're right. It takes years and years of study and research, especially into this phenomena of long COVID that's now debilitating millions and millions of people. It's putting a lot of people out of work. We're physically unable to do the tasks that we used to do at our jobs. It's devastating our health. It's devastating our finances. It's devastating our lives. And we don't know why. And doctors don't have a cure. Doctors don't know how to treat it. They don't understand it yet. It's going to take years to really find out the truth about COVID. But how can we know the truth if our government and the agencies that are supposed to be doing these studies are not responsive to our concerns, or worse, maybe hiding information from us? That's another thing that at least Kennedy has the curiosity to want to get down to the bottom of what the hell happened with COVID.
But it's not
I think that millions of people like me deserve an answer.
It's not curiosity when he's claiming that it targets specific ethnic groups. I think that that's a dangerous,
Right.
place to land your plane on. And do you, in your opinion, is he going to back away from that?
Well, he has tweeted several times just today, responding to that New York Post piece. I don't know if you've looked at his Twitter today, but he did put out a statement about that that's pretty lengthy, and clarified what he meant. I would actually like to let Matthew Tower come in and speak on that, who actually is Jewish, and he had some thoughts I know that he wanted to share, and I think that he should be allowed to respond to that question.
Well, I do want to say one thing though. No one's more, qualified to speak because of their race or religion here. But that's up. Sarah, bring up whoever you want. But yeah.
No, Matthew, I will let you respond. I'm going to go to Dustin, who has not spoken yet. We'll go to Dustin, Charles, and then we'll circle back to you, Matthew, to respond to that. But go ahead, Dustin.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. So I'm an anesthesia provider, and I worked in the intensive care unit for about a year during the Delta pandemic. And it was fascinating how initially when COVID first hit, we weren't seeing deaths like we were, during that year. So we had a crisis of the unvaccinated. Everyone in the ICU was not vaccinated. It was really sad because moms are naturally immunocompromised as part of being pregnant. Your body just can't fight off viruses as well. So we lost hundreds of young moms who then their children would live. And so these kids were all orphans because these moms were unvaccinated. So it was a really tough year for a lot of medical providers like myself. And it was just so sad because knowing that all these women would have survived, had they gotten this vaccine. So, when I see vaccine skepticism, it's so frustrating because I think it comes from a place of not understanding just how many lives were saved, especially for the immunocompromised, based on these vaccines. I was exposed to thousands of COVID patients coughing on me every day, and I wore an N95 mask, but that only helps so much. So, I did okay. I'm a pretty healthy young man, but I know being vaccinated made things a lot easier for me and my coworkers. I had coworkers who had religious exemptions to the COVID vaccine. They got the same exposure that I did. They all got long COVID. They all had really bad effects from it. So, just being there on the front lines and living it really makes it hard for me to support vaccine skepticism.
Hey, Dustin, appreciate everything said, and I agree with you. But I think vaccines is a topic of its own. I think today we're trying to stay on the topic of our presidential candidates, and the real question is JFK is running for president, and he's coming out making statements that are unfounded or maybe founded by some certain information that he got, basically saying that the virus itself was produced not to target certain groups. And I think that's what's concerning to a lot of us to understand. If we were to look at him as becoming the president of the United States, what does that have to do with what I'm saying? Doesn't have to do with vaccines. So if there's anybody that would respond that is a JFK supporter that agrees with him or disagrees with him. RFK. I'm sorry. I'm just getting it. I'm sorry, JFK. And then afterwards, I think I just sent you something, Sarah, about Ron DeSantis. We could discuss. There's an article that came out on NBC just now that basically he's just fired about a dozen staffers. There's turmoil in his group, and we could discuss that a little bit afterwards. But let's talk about RFK first.
Yeah, we'll circle back to you, our Matthew, and then we'll go to Charles. And before you speak, Jim, there's a question in the comments that is specifically for you, and then we'll have you address that as well if you saw that, Jim. But go ahead.
I did see that, and I'll be ready for it when you're ready.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, since we've been talking so much about this controversy that happened literally today, I thought it would just be good to just briefly read out loud what Bobby said. So he's speaking for himself, and I'm not speaking for him. Here's one of his many tweets. The New York Post story is mistaken. I never suggested that COVID-19 virus was targeted to spare Jews. I accurately pointed out during an off-the-record conversation that the U.S. and other governments are developing ethnically targeted bioweapons. And I personally just want to add emphasis to underline that. The U.S. and other governments are developing ethnically targeted bioweapons. That's the point. And that a 2021 study of the COVID-19 virus shows that COVID-19 appears to disproportionately affect certain races, since the Fur-and-Cleave docking site is most compatible with Blacks and Caucasians and least compatible with ethnic Chinese, Finns, and Ashkenazi Jews. So what happened here was just the word Jew appeared there, and it's like, oh my gosh, let's now call him an anti-Semite. And it became this huge fury when he's just talking about a study that showed that. In that sense, it serves as a kind of proof. And then he goes on to say, in that sense, it serves as a kind of proof of concept for ethnically targeted bioweapons. I do not believe and never implied that the ethnic effect was deliberately engineered. The study is here. And then he links to the study. And then he has a bunch of other stuff in his Twitter feed. And the main point again is just he's talking about ethnically targeted bioweapons and raising awareness of that, because that's been something that people haven't really known about, and he's bringing that to light here. That's
Matthew, but what would you say to him making the statements that he hasn't walked back about, that there's chemicals in our water, drinking water, that is basically making children gay or transgender and causing fertilization of boys and masculinization of girls?
Yeah, thanks for representing that one as well, Lev. I appreciate you doing that. And I actually tweeted in our thread his response to that. Let me find that one. Okay, his response to that was, quote, "I've been fact-checked a lot regarding my statements that atrazine and other endocrine disrupting chemicals might be affecting human sexual development and gender dysphoria." And then he refers to somebody else who he says has fact-checked the fact-checkers. And then he's got a long post that he links to from there with a response that actually shows that this very well could be going on. So, that's he has his rebuttal to it. I encourage people to listen. Not listen, to read. You can't compress everything into a 30-second soundbite, right? Like we in our conversation cannot engage in a weighty scientific topic like this and give it the weight it deserves in a minute. But if you actually read this post that's linked, you're going to see the other side to this, and I think it's worth considering.
Leb, go ahead and read it. Go ahead, Charles.
I'll try.
So I just can't stop thinking that this is all for naught. I mean, we are sitting here talking about how is RFK going to get a Democratic nomination, and we're talking about vaccination and vaccine injuries and bioweapon and engineered bioweapons. This is going to be what you would talk about in a right-leaning space, regardless of what this one is. It's just not something that's going to captivate the audience of the left. So that's why I see RFK as a very intriguing figure, totally important guy, but just not a serious candidate, unfortunately. Again, I don't think I would vote for a Democrat regardless, but I still don't believe that he's going to be on the ticket.
Hey Charles,
Go ahead.
I just want to say something. I just want to make it clear that this space is not right or left. We are here to discuss all candidates, and I think you're to talk about Vivek. That's a good subject. I mean, he's a candidate and running it, so I don't think we're leaning one way or the other. We just want to see everybody's opinion about each candidate and what they have to say, and get it out there and let's discuss it.
I believe that makes the case for what my instincts are telling me, that you're going to see Trump beat Joe Biden potentially by a landslide electorally, not necessarily by numbers of votes, but an electoral landslide potential in 2024, because that independent vote is not pleased with what's going on right now. They see Joe Biden as weak. Joe Biden's likely to be the nominee. Obviously, RFK is a big wild card, and we'll have to look at that. But if it's Trump and Biden, I really do believe that Trump is in a position to win based on this analysis in 2024.
Thank you. I believe Matthew is on his way out, so we're going to give him some final thoughts.
Can I just say one thing, you guys? Sarah, I want to say just one real quick thing. You guys, there are 7 retweets of this space. That's embarrassing. You don't pay your way when you go to the movies? You just sneak in, bro? Retweet the space, please.
I'm one of the 7. I'm one of the 7. I'm a
Whoa.
good boy.
I know you
I
are.
am too,
I
by the
stopped.
way.
She scares me, people. She scares me. I feel like I didn't retweet my own space enough. Go ahead, Matthew, and retweet the space, or I can't guarantee anything.
All right, I'll do that on my way out, even though I won't be in it anymore. But thank you for hosting, Sarah and Lev and Sphinx. And my closing comment is that Jim's got it completely wrong. RFK Jr. is going to shock the world. He's going to be the nominee, and then he's going to beat Trump in an absolute landslide. The American people, they may have some positive feelings about Trump, but he's way too polarizing of a figure. And RFK Jr.'s favorability, as I've said, is 40 points ahead of Trump. So, there are a lot of people in this space who have heard a little bit of Bobby Kennedy Jr. They've heard some sound bites, but they haven't really heard directly from the man himself. So I encourage you, go to Kennedy24.com, click on videos, and watch 2 videos. His April launch speech, and then his peace speech. He gave a sequel to John F. Kennedy's peace speech, which was, in my opinion, the greatest presidential speech of all time, June 10th, 1963. And then on June 20th, 2023, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. outlined a vision of world peace. And he is going to negotiate peace with Russia directly, immediately after being elected president. Go listen to that. And if you want to check out my podcast, it's called RFK All the Way, on all the different podcast platforms and Rumble. I was censored on YouTube just like everyone else, but Rumble alive and strong. So thank you so much. And Lori's got it from here on the RFK stuff.
And by the way, Matthew, I don't have it wrong. I'm telling everyone that RFK is a wild card, that it changes everything if he gets the nomination. I'm cheering on his nomination effort. I'm not calling a book against him. I'm not putting my own book up there. It is going to be very difficult for RFK to make it through a rigged process in the primary process. And if he can overcome that, the whole thing changes. And we don't even know what that looks like yet. That does not mean that he would beat Donald Trump, but there's no doubt he has a high level of favorabilities if these recent comments don't cause him trouble. I hope they don't, because I don't believe he's some anti-Semitic person at all. I think that's bogus. But it came across that way, and it's going to depend on how that plays out. So unless that wild card causes him problems, Hey, I cheer him on for doing well. I think he's a patriot. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I think he's a patriot and I think he's a good man. I think his engagement in this process is good for everybody. It's good for the country, and I wish him well. I just happen to be supporting Donald Trump. So, and I gave my analysis there. But anyway, good luck to you, Matthew.
Thanks, everyone. I'll catch you all later. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
I just want to say we've been having some technical difficulties. Ariel, I think Noah's one. We're trying to bring people back up, so please be patient with us. We'll just keep trying.
Thanks, Sphinx. Dr. Donish, welcome. Let's hear your thoughts on my wonderful space.
Hi, Sarah. I'm
Hello.
scared of Sphinx, but I will not be scared into retweeting a space. Just kidding. I was gonna say that
I actually forgot, and you
Like me,
scared me. I
just
just did it.
kidding. He means just
Lev,
kidding. He
I
is
will
scared.
not heal. I will not bend, Lev. I can't believe you did it
I
so quickly.
well, I know Suleiman is your great leader, so I know where that comes from.
That's funny.
I just want to clarify that he meant just kidding. He is afraid of me.
That's fair. I was gonna say that, you know, I think we have seen now too many examples of how RFK Jr. is gonna be in his own way. I think that as an actual Democrat voter, I have to tell you that he does not truly represent what most people in the party are looking for. I'm just being very honest. I think it's important for us to be honest about the fact that there are more Republicans that like RFK Jr. than there are Democrats. Can we keep it honest? Finally, please. I know the Republicans are trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen. We're not going to suddenly see RFK Jr., if he was an independent candidate, he would have a better shot of actually winning any sort of election or actually making a difference than as a Democrat. And the reality is that as a Democrat, I am very confused about what to do. The only options we truly have is a Joe Biden that also is losing our trust. I think as many people that know me know that I have many issues that I care about. War is the biggest one that I have to say is always on the top of my mind, and I cannot believe that the Democratic Party has become the party of war. It has become very confusing for the average Democratic voter that is looking for non military solutions for we were the party of the State Department. We were the party that thought diplomacy before war, and that is completely gone now. And I think that's what's confusing. That's the only part of RFK that people like, and unfortunately it's actually the part of RFK that people just cannot understand why he's not able to come up with a coherent strategy around his foreign policy outside of just wars are bad. I want to hear how. I want to, just like, he's been talking about other things. I will say where he stands on COVID policies in terms of lockdowns and mandates, I think many people agree with. But all of this stuff about Wi-Fi causing all these issues, all of the stuff that about autism, which, by the way, I'm happy to refute anybody on vaccines in general and autism. It's a ridiculous commentary, and it's been clearly debunked. So, these are all things that just make him clearly outside of where Democrats want the party to go. And I think that people just need to start saying it. Republicans need to stop making RFK seem like on Twitter, the only people that are retweeting him are Republicans. This is the funniest situation.
I just want to say apologize. Noah, I'm trying to bring you up, dear, but do you mind exiting the space and to try coming back because there's just a glitch and I don't know what's going on. Thanks.
I have to agree with Dr. Danish. I mean, I think the chances of RFK becoming a Democratic nominee, I think Chris Christie has a better chance of becoming a Republican nominee than he does becoming a Democrat. His chances would be better if he ran as an independent. I think he has zero chance. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Jonish, because we've spoken a lot about that in other spaces, that he seems to be the ideal Democratic candidate, but only for conservatives. Even I don't understand that people keep calling him the Democrat, the way back Democrat. He's going to bring us back to the old Democratic Party, but even his own family, which do represent the Kennedy family, do not support him. I'm interested, Lori, how do you overcome that when his own family does not support him?
Well, you have to bear in mind that the Kennedys have been Democrats since the 1930s, when Joseph Kennedy worked in the administration of Franklin Roosevelt. So they are married to the Democratic Party, and that's why Bobby is running to save the Democratic Party, to bring it back to the party of FDR, back to the party of JFK and LBJ. So as far as his own family goes, they are a political family. Debates have always been encouraged in the Kennedy family around the dinner table. They're currently at Hyannisport for their annual July vacation. They bring this huge family together with like hundreds of cousins and nephews and nieces, and they debate politics. And even though they're Democrats, most of them, not all of them are Democrats. Yes, there are some Kennedy Republicans in the family. But, a heated debate where you still love each other at the end of the day, isn't that what most families are like? The Kennedys are no different.
But
Lori,
Lori, they're not.
let me ask you a question.
But
Oh, go
they
ahead.
are a very powerful family. They are powerful amongst Democrats, and they are not supporting him, and they are very public about that. Now, you can be all warm and cozy as a family, but it does make a difference that his family is not supporting him. It certainly does, with moderate Democrats and even very left-leaning Democrats.
Sarah,
Well, certainly.
honestly, not all of Trump's family is supporting him either. So,
True.
He doesn't need them.
Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead, Larry.
Well, it is awkward, to say the least, because the Bidens and the Kennedys have been good friends for some 40 years. Caroline Kennedy is currently Biden's ambassador to Australia, and other members of the Kennedy family are all in with Biden. They've already declared their endorsements for Joe Biden in 2024. And that certainly makes things awkward around the dinner table this July in Hyannisport, I'm sure. And I'm not privy to those conversations, nor would I want to be, because I'm sure they're pretty heated right now.
Lori, let me ask
to be a
you,
fly on the wall.
knowing that, why wouldn't he run as an independent, knowing that, his chances of becoming a Democratic nominee are very slim, obviously, because of the way everything's put together, and his own family is close with, like what you just said, with the Bidens, and the way, Jim said, it's rigged on the Democratic part. So knowing what he knows, why not run as an independent? Why try to run as a Democrat?
Great question. On a personal level, Lev, I agree with you, because I've been an independent third-party voter myself for 30 years. I wish he would run as an independent, but he is sticking with the Democratic Party because he really, truly believes this in his heart, that this party has to be saved. And we all know, longtime Democrats know that their party's been taken from them. Many of us don't feel that this party represents our values anymore. We want to go back to the party of free speech. We want to go back to the party of anti-war. He represents those values that have been lost in this party of censorship and corporatism.
But Lori, I'm sorry, but he does not represent anything around what Democrats believe in terms of, institutions. Nothing around how we think about law. Nothing around how we actually think about the most important part to me is around our public health officials, about working with the institutions, around the fact that that his points around Wi-Fi and vaccines. I mean, this guy's like completely off the rocker from a Democrat's point of view. I mean, I'm just being very honest with you. To try to say that he represents one or two of the things, sure, he's anti-war, but So is Bernie. I mean, like, there's other people in the party that could represent the Democratic Party. There are Elizabeth Warren's anti-war. AOC used to be anti-war. I guess now she's pro-Ukraine. And but the point is, there's definitely other people in the Democratic Party. It's just Biden is not anti-war.
I couldn't agree more with you. And by the way, there aren't any anti-war Democrats. There really aren't. I mean, look in the Congress. Every time there's a vote for more funding for Ukraine.
Bernie's in Congress still.
But he votes for more aid and more weapons to Ukraine and to keep funding and pushing this war. Not a single Democrat has voted against war funding for Ukraine. So right now, the current Democratic Party is not anti-war. And I find that position abhorrent. And Bobby agrees with me.
That's fair.
So we have a new speaker to our stage, an invited guest. We have Kyle Kemper. Good evening, Kyle. If you'd like, you can do a brief introduction, and we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead.
Sarah, well, thank you very much for inviting me, and greetings, everybody. My name's Kyle Kemper, longtime entrepreneur, evangelist, crypto guy, Bitcoin, class of 2013. And earlier this year, well before RFK kind of announced, I was listening to him and I was like, my gosh, this guy would be just the best president ever, in my opinion. And then when he made that announcement, I was like, okay, I'm all in. And I have a bus that says Blockchain Across America, or that said Blockchain Across America. And at the Bitcoin Miami conference this May, I had some local Miami artists paint a mural of RFK's face on the side of it and the campaign logo on the other side, and have been driving all across America. I'm actually in Canada now, was where I hail from. And just kind of really, I got this sense, like, I was really involved, or was a deep follower of the Ron Paul campaign back in 2008, 2012. And I could kind of just feel like, wow, like, I feel like there's something different here. And so anyways, that's where I'm kind of coming at it. And I've been, I've got a lot of different experience, and I come from a political family as well. And I'll just say my half brother is Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, and we see very, very differently on many, many issues. But I love him dearly. So thanks for having me.
Can you convince him to change his mind on a few things, Kyle? Can we have a coffee together and talk some sense into him?
Or at least, Kyle, at least bring him on our space.
Yes, Kyle, please give him a call. Bring him up. Tell him to come on.
No, we can have a coffee. It's okay. It doesn't have to be, it can be casual. We can have brunch. It's okay.
I mean, I would love to say he would do all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't. Like, he doesn't do open interviews. He does not engage. I don't think I feel like he would love to, but he just doesn't. It's really sad. And I think that's like, it's reflective of the condition of, corporate politics these days, is there's no, deep engagement with the citizenry. And, that's why, I really feel like, that's why I kind of got so much into RFK, because, like, man, he's actually engaging with everybody, and it's really beautiful.
Kyle, not to cut you off, but on that, are you an American citizen? Or are you
No.
Canadian citizen? So you went all in on RFK. You have a bus. I saw a tweet of yours where you were driving the bus through Canada, and yeah,
correct. Yeah, I brought it to Parliament Hill, honked the horn. It was great. I wasn't able to be like in Ottawa for the Great Canadian Trucker Rally. But I brought the bus there after visiting my 102-year-old grandfather. And yeah, I just got, a great article written up yesterday by one of Canada's leading propagandists, attacking me for, doing what
Catherine
I do,
Brodsky?
but it's all good. No.
Was it me?
I don't even want
Catherine.
I'm not even going to give him any, I don't even want to give him any energy.
No, you don't have to. I'm curious why if you are a proud Canadian, why you would go all in on American politics. What's your angle there?
Well, my wife is American. I have two American, children, citizens, and I also feel like Canada, like Canada follows the states. I mean, we're basically like the 51st state. We're
Thank,
so heavily influenced
thank God you get it. You
we're
know.
so heavily influenced by American politics, and literally nothing's going to change up here till their next election is going to be in 2025. After the trucker rally, the NDP and the Liberals cut a deal to basically assure that they all got pensions. So it was very selfish what they actually did. And so they're through in power until 2025, at which point there'll be an election. And America's got an election 2024. Let's go, November 5th. Here we go. And I feel that if the remedy Kennedy can plant himself in, that it's not just going to help America, but it'll help the rest of the world too, and help de-escalate like the radicalization of our societies. And try and I just like this core message. I have it written on the bus. It says heal the divide. And, I think it's so important to have open, honest discourse. And I swear, guys, I've been like all these reporters who reach out, I simply ask them, like, do you mind just jumping on a Zoom with me? I'm going to record it and let's just have an open discussion. If you want to ask questions, let's do it. But none of them will ever do that. They just want little clips, and then they write these smear pieces, but they have no ability to actually to be accountable themselves or answer any of the questions. Just these one-sided articles, and it's really frustrating. So, I like what Kennedy's doing. He's like, I'm not doing pre-recorded articles, because we saw what happened with ABC. And he's just being out there and open and creating content. So God bless that man.
Well, welcome to Spaces, because we have a very open dialogue. Typically, voices aren't shut down, and sometimes you have to put your feet in the fire and face the hard questions, which is not a medium for everyone.
Well, one thing I would just say as a recommendation to anyone who is in the spotlight is kind of that could be a little bit controversial. If you are doing press interviews, I would recommend recording. Like, as a journalist, I always record every interview fully, but also as a subject matter, I would recommend just recording it for your own protection as well. So if any quotes are taken misattributed or anything like that, you have recourse and you have the full recording.
Absolutely.
I
And
can tell
a
you.
quick tip too, you can use QuickTime to do a screen recording. There's an app called Loopback, and then you won't actually have to press record on like a Zoom or anything. It'll just record your screen and your audio.
Yeah, I can tell you, having done many interviews with people myself, and having worked with congressmen and others doing interviews, always record. And sometimes you'll get pushback from a reporter, and I just always, you got to be hard-nosed about it, because you definitely need to do it. It can really get out of place.
They should really have no reason to push back if they're honest.
No, you're right.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
zero.
unfortunately, they do. I've done thousands of interviews, and let me tell you, they have a story and they want to run with the narrative. And if you're not feeding into the narrative, they get very uninterested quickly.
Yeah.
Could I jump in on that as a journalist? And I'd like to ask other journalists on this panel. The big viral story today about what Kennedy said at that dinner the other night. That was a dinner for journalists. The story in the New York Post. And the video that's circulating where he's talking about the virus and how it may be affecting different ethnicities differently. Now, Kennedy claims that was an off-the-record dinner. And every journalist in this room knows what that means. But journalists are piping up who were actually at the meeting, saying that the organizer of the meeting told them that they could record and that it was not off the record. I wanted to get your thoughts on that from an ethical standpoint.
But Catherine should have answered that, but let me just kind of throw this out from the interviewee side of things. There is, if you do not have the discipline of telling yourself that there is no such thing as off the record, then you have no discipline when it comes to media interviews. There's no such thing as off the record. I never did anything off the record. I never, no person I ever worked with were there. When you need to speak as if you're on the record always, recorded or not, whatever. You always have to treat it like that. If you don't, you will slip up. This is one of the major problems that candidates and organizations have.
Yeah, I guess especially if you are a politician, you are knowingly around media. But I will say, from my perspective, and look, and everyone has different ethical lines with this. I have very specific, very strict ethical lines myself, but and colleagues of mine have very different ones. For example, I have a colleague who said that anything anybody ever says to them, unless they specifically say. Can you mute yourself? Sorry, because I hear like a sound. I don't know if it's Jim or yeah.
I muted him. Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay. Anytime I hear anytime he is at an event or something, because the people know that he's a journalist, if they say anything to him, he considers that on the record, unless they specifically said off the record.
Is that the norm, Catherine? Would you consider that journalistic
some
ethics?
journalists. Well, I don't, but he does, right? So I'm just saying how different people treat it. For me, it is different. I don't. I consider everything is private unless we have an on the record conversation, in which case I consider it on the record. And if somebody asks me to keep something off the record, then I will keep it off the record and I'll respect that. I'm not trying to do a gotcha with anybody. That's how I adhere to it personally. In terms of the dinner, like, I guess you would have to know if, honestly, if there's several journalists who are saying that the organizer had told them that this would be on the record, then, I mean, it's kind of their word against one person. So,
well, see, here's where it gets interesting, Catherine. The organizer really is not the person to say whether the candidate's conversation is on or off the record. That would be up to the campaign press secretary or campaign staff or Mr. Kennedy himself. So far, none of these journalists have said that they were told by the campaign that it was to be off the record. And they're saying that the organizer of the event told them that it could be on the record. So that's where the confusion arises. As far as I know, no one from Kennedy's campaign told them that they could not record. As a matter of fact, when you look at the video, the lady sitting next to him, that's Stephanie Spear. That's the campaign press secretary. She's aware that there's a camera rolling. The person is only sitting 3 seats away. She knows the camera's there and doesn't seem to be objecting to it. So it's
seems fair game. To be honest, to me, from what you described, seems kind of like fair game. Especially this is a press dinner. Like, usually when you're invited to something like that, there is an expectation that you would report on that, right? Why else would you coming to that?
That's
so,
right.
I think that was probably fair game. Yeah, unless they actually said, please keep this. Like, look, if I was having a private conversation with him and we just went off and he's like, listen, this is just kind of between us or whatever,
right.
I'd probably respect that. But if we're like in this kind of situation, I think that was fair game for them to report on it based on what has been described to me.
Catherine.
Right, and it was a dinner for journalists. Those were specifically journalists invited to
Catherine,
dinner.
I do want to say, and I want to say to this space, everything I've ever said ever is off the record. Thank you.
You can't do that after the fact, Catherine,
Sarah.
And the space is recorded, by the way.
That's
right. You'll just have to edit out my portions. Catherine, have some ethics, man. Everything I've ever said ever is off the record.
That's why I never record my spaces.
And by the way, I want to throw out there, like, if I was ever going to consider doing anything off the record, it would be with someone like Catherine, whom I happen to know personally, and I know her integrity is strong. Okay, so there might be some reason, possibly, maybe. But the ethical consideration is on the reporter's end, if there's some agreement to that. And if they are unethical and use that, that's wrong. Of course, that also takes trust away. But again, I just repeat, if you're the person being reported upon, you have to treat everything as the record, because also that reporter might make a mistake, even if there's an agreement to go off the record. I mean, you're talking this part's on the record, this part's not. Like that can also cause problems because we're human beings, and so that's why you got to treat it that way.
Yeah, and I've had people actually in the middle of conversations that are being recorded. I've had people request, "Hey, can we go off the record in this part?" Which is, by the way, another reason why I, as a reporter, record all my conversations, which, by the way, not all reporters do. Years ago, I was quoted because there was an article, just like kind of a trade article about, when you should, whether people should record conversations or not in reporting. And I'm always like, always recorded. For example, because I'm going to forget which part, like innocently, right? Not intentionally, but I could easily forget when you've asked me to stay off the record. That could happen and by mistake. But if I have it recorded, I've got that. But also, there's a lot of journalists, like, because I've been interviewed in the past, and they've really screwed up my lines, by the way, my quotes, because they just write it down and they do sort of a shorthand thing, and it's not exact, and like, it's somebody's reputation, and like, I take that very, very seriously, but sorry, not everyone does, and so you have to protect yourself.
Hey, Kyle, speaking of that, it's Lori Spencer with Maverick News. Hello. You've been a guest on our program before. I believe Rick Walker, my co-host, has interviewed you a few times back during the Freedom Convoy or shortly thereafter. But very glad to see that you're on Team Kennedy.
Thanks, Lori.
And welcome aboard. And I love what you're doing with the bus. Just had a quick question for you. Will you be doing tours of the U.S. in that thing? You going to bring it down here?
Oh, I mean, I just drove it from Sarasota up to Canada, and we went all the way up the coast and we've put ourselves in a parade in one of the nation's oldest running parades in Chatham, Massachusetts, and had the bus, picked up some Kennedy supporters, had the loudspeaker going. We're playing the JFK Kennedy campaign song on repeat. It was absolutely incredible. And
that's great.
I like to validate things too, because I don't really trust a lot of the stuff that I see or hear online. I want to kind of see what's going on with the people, and by actually going out there and engaging, I'll say yeah, there's definitely people that are against it, but I mean, I had some people knocking on the door of my bus declaring look, I'm in this in Myrtle Beach, for example. One guy came up at the gas station and was like, I am a Republican, lifelong Republican, but I like Kennedy and I really like him and I will be voting for him. It's like, wow, okay, that's a sign. And then to see the independents as well, for example, Lynn Ulbricht, who's Ross Ulbricht's son. Ross is in jail forever because of whatever. He was an internet entrepreneur and created something that went viral, and it infracted upon one of the dark industries, and that's responsible for a lot of money. And Bobby said, I will really look at Ross's situation, and and if it warrants, just like Assange, I'll grant a pardon on that. So he's just drawing from all over, and I fully intend to continue to drive around and do activations, inspire others to, and encourage others to as well. Because I mean, I will say that the Canadian trucker convoy was highly inspirational, and it brought so much kind of life brought so much hope to a lot of Canadians who had been so isolated and living in these silos. And then when they were able to connect with people on a purpose, something really great happened. And obviously, the ideal outcome of having a discussion about many of the topics, that warrant discussion, didn't occur. Instead, the government chose the strategy of enrage versus engage. And I believe that's because, lies really don't stand up to open debate and discussion, and require censorship and attacking and name calling. Again, I encourage everybody, if you're down, figure out ways to participate in your own ways. If you have an RV, it's pretty easy to paint it white and put a logo on it.
Hey, Kyle.
Some stuff.
I got an idea. Let's do a Kennedy convoy all the way across the U.S. and Canada.
I mean, we've got the convoy people that are interested, and
Do the convoy to Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
You should do the convoy to
Oh, that's
Mar-a-Lago.
great. That's
or to
great.
Martha's Vineyard.
Are we getting Canadians to vote for Kennedy? Is this?
I'm afraid that would be very illegal.
I just tell Canadians who
Oh,
are in.
apparently hasn't stopped people before, so I keep getting told
Right?
by the Republicans. They're just
I'm
If you
not
guys
giving
annex
advice
us,
here,
we can.
but there are some places in the United States where you only need 30 days to establish residency where you can vote. So if there are any
Whoa.
Canadians that really love Bobby and want to vote for him, come on down to the United
You
States.
hear that, Catherine? I've got
join
a
us.
couch with your name on it.
I'm. Oh, really, Sarah? Okay. Let's go.
Kyle, Christmas dinner must be very interesting with your family because you were very, very staunchly critical of what was happening with the trucker convoy, and now your support for RFK. It almost seems to be thumbing your nose at your brother. What do you think? Am I off base?
I mean, I'm not like thumbing I think Justin, has taken his own path, and I don't agree with it. And over the years, there's been lots of things that we've disagreed on. And this was really one of my, greatest concerns with him becoming, prime minister, was that, we would see like another 9/11 situation take place, and he would be an accomplice in it. And anyways, but like the core of this was, I was concerned that another large situation like that would occur underneath while Justin was as the leader of the party. And he would become a figurehead piece in it. And that's exactly what happened. And Justin went from being absolutely loved by so many Canadians to all of a sudden, Joe Rogan said it pretty clearly. It's like, all of a sudden he turned into a dictator tyrant. And I don't think that's like him specifically. I don't think he thought it was going to go on as long as it did. But honestly, I think Justin signed up to be signed up for the show. And I don't honestly believe that he's in control, just like I don't believe Biden's in control, of the situation.
Who do you believe is in control at the very least in Canada?
I mean, it's the same people that are controlling the States, the same people that are controlling Europe. It's this global corporatocracy. There's no one person. I mean, at the very highest of the high, it's it's the central banking. It's the those who create the money, in my opinion. But there's
Kyle, do you think it's the United States elite that are basically making Canada a servant state of sorts? I mean, we know that during the Freedom Convoy, it was in fact the Biden administration that was contacting the Canadian government and ordering them to freeze bank accounts of these truckers making donations to the convoy. Of course, Biden was very upset about the Ambassador Bridge and other bridges being shut down, and he was telling Justin Trudeau to shut this thing down. Do you think that also applies to things like foreign policy? Isn't that why Canada's aligned with us and NATO on the war and things like that?
Well, I feel like Canada is is kind of it's there. We've been Canada, Australia, New Zealand, specifically with COVID, we pushed some of the hardest restrictions, and really were kind of out front, more out front than even America could be, because America is man, it's tough. There's a lot of it's big, and it's kind of unwieldy. But Canada kind of set that stage, and same with the Ukraine thing. I mean, the whole Ukraine thing started, it was right after right after they declared the Emergency Act. It was right at the end of the trucker thing. All of a sudden, Ukraine became this huge thing, and Justin just started talking about Ukraine. All of a sudden, everybody started putting the friggin' flags in their their names, and it was we absolutely must start battling this this war over there and supporting it and sending tons of our money and our soldiers and our weapons over there. And so Canada was one of the champions for this and continues to be, like, a staunch advocate for for war. And I constantly am engaging, asking, where's the talk of peace? Why no diplomacy? Why is it all just about more weapons, more killing? Why can't we have diplomacy or peace?
Kyle, I just don't hate to
Christopher.
interrupt you, but I think you have to push back a little bit. I mean, the reason for that is because there's nobody to speak to about peace. You're dealing with a tyrant in Putin, and that is attacked a sovereign country and is trying to take it over. And there's nothing to this. I mean, if he would be able to be somebody that had common logic, then you could sit down with him and discuss. But he has not. There's nothing to discuss. He wants to take over land. He wants to take over the country, if not all of it, most of it, or parts of it. And I mean, and those are non-negotiable starting. So that's why I think the problem is it's hard to speak about peace at this time until Russia gets a little bit more a taste of their own medicine, which now they're becoming weaker in his own administration. Ukraine is pushing back. I think with time, once he realizes that he miscalculated, misjudged, thinking that the NATO and the whole world wasn't going to support Ukraine and he would be an easy just walk in and take it, I think then they'll be able to come to the table and talk about peace. But unfortunately, and I'm against war and I don't want to see anybody die, and especially, I'm from Ukraine and I don't want to see all those millions of people being displaced and, all the horror stories. But unfortunately, right now, there's no way to talk to about peace. Believe me, Zelensky would love to talk about peace.
I mean, I feel like Zelensky is another kind of one of these, like very similar to, my brother is kind of like, a marked man, like, put into that place. I don't think Zelensky's like he was an actor who actually role played that role before going in there. And I don't think it's so simple just to say that, like, Putin was going in he wants to take Ukraine and put a Russian flag on it. I think it's a much longer story of well, I mean, I'll say what Bobby says about it. It's NATO's encroachment towards it, and putting missiles right along the border and creating this hotbed and creating this situation for this. It's like the Cubans putting missiles in, the Russians putting missiles in Cuba, or if the Chinese.
But Kyle, with all the respect, I mean, we already have NATO all over there. You got Finland, that's a NATO country. You have Sweden now just became in there. You have Lithuania, they're NATO, and we got 800 miles of border with Russia that are NATO countries. So if that was the case, why isn't Putin invading all those countries? It's a lot deeper than that, and that's why anybody that really understands the Soviet Union and Russian politics and the Putin's culture and what he's been trying to achieve for the past 20 years since he's taken power, is his goal was from day one to take over Ukraine, take over all of the other countries that left the Soviet Union, and reunite the Soviet Union back together and make it one of the most powerful nations to be able to deal with China, U.S., and so on.
I mean, you're making
so that's
assumptions there, Lev. I appreciate you, but I mean, you're in his mind and making declarations on his behalf about his intentions, and I don't.
Well, not really, Kyle, because
Well, not really. I mean, you
I
go based
I
on his
know,
actions and
and not
statements.
only his actions, but I know a lot of people that were surrounding him in his cabinetry. I know a lot of the politicians in Ukraine personally. I know Zelensky personally. I know his chief of staff Yermak personally. I've dealt with most of the oligarchs that were involved in politics, both in Russia and Ukraine. So I think I have a pretty good idea, and I've been doing business in Russia since 1989. I left the Soviet Union in 1976, but since '89, I was there when the wall came down. So I was very much involved and know a lot of people that are close to it, know it, and are there. So I think I could tell you pretty well.
The path forward is with this? Like, how do we get peace? How does this like, when will this end? like more bombs,
You
more money?
know, I'll tell you, Kyle, it's a really fucked up situation. I mean, there's no answer to it right now because what Putin did is he miscalculated. He thought he was going to come in into because of several things that came into play. First, about the information he was getting from his own pro-Russian politicians that were in Ukraine. The second, to about what was going on in our own in the United States, the turmoil we were going through between Biden and Trump and all of this stuff and Congress. And the last but not least is he never believed that NATO, not only the U.S. and NATO, would give so much money and give the weapons. Because if you take a look, even how many red lines he's put up over the past year and a half that the U.S. along with NATO has crossed, and by giving more weapons, and now we're going to be giving F-16s, which every time, excuse me, he came out and said, if the U.S. gives them more weapons, we're going to, even Medvedev came out and said we're going to use nukes, and they haven't. So I think he miscalculated a lot. I think he's on, that's why he's having turmoil in his own country and is having people that are now like what happened with Prigozhin, with the coup attempt that transpired. Now he's trying to realign that. But now he understands that now he doesn't know who to trust inside his own country. So I think the way it ends is eventually when Putin realizes that he can't win, that he's going to have to figure out how to try to get out of it by saving face. Unfortunately, I don't know what that is right now because it's because of the way he's gone so far and because of all the deaths and all the atrocities that he's caused and all the destruction that he's done in Ukraine. It's put Ukraine in such a position where if this was talked about maybe a year ago, I think there would have been a lot more Ukrainian people, and Ukraine would have been willing to give up to stop this peace. But I think now that it's gotten to a point where it's become even more personal to their people that have lost loved ones, have seen the atrocities, and have nowhere to live, that are now don't want to back up. And as long as we support them with the ammunition and the finances, I think Putin's in a lot of trouble.
Well,
Lev, on that point, I agree with you. A year ago, I believe this could have been settled and so many lives would not have been lost. We know that Putin and Zelensky were speaking to one another in the spring of 2022, that there was a peace agreement, at least initialed, between the two parties, and then Boris Johnson comes over from the UK and puts the kibosh on that. And so here we are. I mean, we've entrenched ourselves deeper and deeper. Who knows what the true death toll is at this point? I'm not sure we're getting an accurate accounting from either side, but the numbers that I'm hearing are atrocious. Upwards of 300 to 350,000 Ukrainians.
It's terrible. And not only that, but the tens of millions of people that are displaced and from their homes and
yes.
have left the country and have no place to live and are, it's just
so
the humanitarian.
Bombs is not the solution. Sending more weapons is not the solution to de-escalate a war.
What do you think the solution is?
What would you say?
You send more weapons. You send more. You would kill more Ukrainians. We kill more.
No, Kyle. What would you recommend? How do you see?
You kill more. I'm not saying I have the exact solution here, but I'm saying the more money that you're taking, and this is money. These are weapons that are being paid for by sovereign nations and citizens of sovereign nations of Canada. Canada spent $8 billion. That's $1,000. That's $200 per person. I've got a family.
So, Kyle, do you not want Ukrainians to be able to defend themselves? Like, what is the solution? Like, there's no negotiation, right? Because right now, if you go to the negotiation table with Russia, that means Russia just takes everything and hurts people, right? So, if they are not able to fight back to defend their country,
that's a huge assumption. Like, force those, engage in serious diplomacy towards.
But it's not an assumption.
What does diplomacy mean?
Let him
but Kyle, let's be serious first.
Let him answer, and then I'll let you push back. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I would say bring together a diplomatic session to solve the peace situation, to stop the bloodshed, to stop the killing of the Ukrainians and the Russians, and to stop just the free flow of money into this proxy war, because this is the military-industrial complex is the winner out of this entire fiasco.
Kyle, let me ask you a question, and two-part question. Take Ukraine out of it and put Canada, your country, in it. Say tomorrow Canada is invaded by, say, Russia or China, and is getting and hundreds of thousands of people are dying, and they want to take over and make now Canada part of China. Would you agree? Would you not want NATO and the U.S. to come out and give you all the support and help there to defend your sovereign nation, to be able to live as free people?
I mean, I don't think that's fair, Lev.
Why?
Because
Why?
because
What's the
what
difference?
the difference is, if okay, so if the Chinese had come into, or like you're suggesting that in this, Russia's motive is to put a Russian flag on Ukraine.
Absolutely. They have no other. What other motive do you see? Because we got to take NATO out of the equation, because there's Lithuania, Finland, Sweden. You got all these NATO countries on the border of Russia right now. So he's not attacking them, because if he was worried about NATO, he'd be attacking all of those countries also. And Ukraine's not even part of NATO. So he's attacking a sovereign country that's not part of NATO, just under pretenses that he said that they were applying for NATO, and he didn't want them to become NATO. But he's not attacking actual NATO countries that are on his border, 800 miles of it. So that's not the reason. What other reason do you believe? I know the reason, because of having spent most of my life there and dealing with those people and being around them. But what do you think his reasoning is?
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Kyle.
in my opinion, this is not. I don't think you can just exclude the NATO discussion from it. I think since 2014, there has been significant influence from the military-industrial complex led by the U.S. neocons towards shifting the politics of Ukraine, and Ukraine is not Finland in terms of the long history of it. So there has been provocations within there, and it all of a sudden it has come to this kind of boiling point now. But again, like, I don't think that just an endless war is the solution. Like,
No, and I agree with you that
so,
that the endless war is not a solution. But
but
just to give you a little bit more background and
Let
history
let
for
him finish
yourself.
there, Lev.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry. Go
ahead. Go
ahead,
ahead.
Kyle. Go ahead,
no,
Kyle. Go ahead.
I'm like, this is not like this is not my. I don't consider myself a Ukraine policy expert. Lev, obviously, you've spent a lot more time with Zelensky and with the Russian oligarchs, so you have a good inside track on it, on that side of the story.
Shots fired, Lev.
I appreciate
I
that,
love
Kyle. And
it.
I'm not trying to box you in the corner. We're having a good debate, good conversation, and I'd like to hear all kinds of points
Well,
of
I don't
views.
think
And the most important thing is I'd like to get certain facts out there, so we understand. So in 2014, when everybody, a lot of the right is saying that the U.S. Started this coup in Ukraine and because of that, Putin was left with no choice. That's not the fact. The fact of the matter is that Yanukovych was a pro-Russian president. He escaped to Russia. He lives in Russia right now. So let's understand. He had a chance to. The people of Ukraine wanted to sign with the EU. They wanted to move closer towards the West. He promised them that. And then at the last second, on the last day, he came out and made an announcement that he's going to go with Russia. The reason that was happening is because of Paul Manafort and the money he was receiving from Russian oligarchs, and that were directly coming from Putin, to be able to push, not through war, but through a political way, to take over Ukraine by installing a Russian president. When he couldn't achieve that, his last choice was to invade the country. So I just want to make it clear that it wasn't because of some mystical thing that happened. Putin has been trying to take over Ukraine for the longest time. The only thing is he's been trying to do it through internally by installing a Russian president and having them come closer to them, and then eventually switch over their policies. But when that failed and the U.S. supported Ukraine and then gave him all that money in 2014 to basically pull away, he basically had no choice. Otherwise, he understood his time is running out, and as long as he wants to leave a legacy behind him, that he wants to be able to reunite the Soviet Union, and that's a big factor for
What
him.
do you think about the people of Ukraine? Like, if there was a vote today of like an actual like fully transparent, honest vote in the people of Ukraine, do you think they'd want this war to continue?
1,000,000%.
Yes.
1,000,000%. I mean,
Kyle,
I
you have
can't
to
even explain
understand
to you.
something. Someone has broken into your house, and now you're being told you must use diplomacy and negotiate for them to leave. This makes zero common sense. So, in a
And to
sense,
add to it, things
yeah.
they took over your bedroom and they took over your son's bedroom, and they're saying, well, you want to negotiate? We're going to keep 2 of those bedrooms, and you could keep the living room.
I mean, this is a war tactic. When you are on the offense, when you make the first strike, right? When you invade, the other person then has to work just to get the status quo back. These are known strategies. These are known strategies in business, in any kind of war. So, but I have to say, I am not a fan of Zelensky. I am not. I'm not a fan of sending blank checks to Ukraine. I'm not. But this whole thing of, well, the Ukrainians need to come to the table and stuff. Well, get out of their house first. How about that? They're getting bombed.
And I agree with Sphinx
Well,
100%. We shouldn't be sending a blank check. There should be accountability there because there's corruption that goes on. It doesn't matter on what level, especially during war. There's plenty of corruption. So I'm not trying to say that this is a perfect situation, but we have to take all the little points aside and look at the main factor. The main factor is that people's lives are being killed. Homes being displaced. Children are losing their parents. And if we take our loved ones, if we take ourselves and take out Ukraine and put our country in it, what would we want to happen? Would we fight to make sure that to throw them out? Americans would do the same thing. They would fight to the last bit to make sure that we wouldn't get taken over, and any country would. So that's the whole key in the question. Go ahead,
And
Kat.
I just wanted to say, can I
Yes.
just say one point on diplomacy? Yeah, because I was, so just one point on diplomacy. I mean, the way that negotiation and diplomacy works is that nobody does it out of the goodness of their heart, right? Like there's a bargaining chip, so there's something to offer and something to gain. So each country has to be in a certain position. So for Ukraine to gain something to stop the bloodshed, they need to be in a position to pressure Russia to stop killing people and invading them. For that, they need a very strong defense. They need to cause some level of damage to Russian troops. They need to be strong. That's why they need the defense. That's why they need the international support. And that's why they do need to fight back. So that was the point that I wanted to make. And in terms of you asked, Kyle, what Ukrainians would say in terms of what their vote would be. I mean, they're more militant than I am on this situation because of the way that they feel about being invaded and what has happened to them. They are very willing to fight. That is the sentiment within Ukraine based on the conversations I've had.
so I'm gonna go to Matthew, and then we'll try to swing it back to the candidates, because we could talk about Ukraine until the cows come home. Go ahead, Matthew, and then we'll go to John. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thanks, Sarah. Just for the record, since this is being recorded, I do not speak for Mr. Kennedy. I run a podcast about his campaign called RFK All the Way, but it is independent from the campaign. And I'm just saying this because there's some new people in the space, and I wanted that to be clear. So listening to this conversation, it's pretty amazing to me just how much of the actual history and the truth of what has taken place is not being discussed. So first of all, let's go back to immediately after World War II, the CIA started training Ukrainian Banderites, neo-Nazis, in preparation for subversion of Russia and the Soviet Union. So that's some important history. And I don't know if Lori's talked about it, but Lori Spencer can elaborate more on that because that's one of her areas of specialty. Okay, so let's fast forward to the end of the Cold War. We made a solemn promise to Russia at the end of the Cold War, as the Soviet Union was breaking up, that we would not expand NATO 1 inch east. And this was a condition of the Soviet Union, as it turned into Russia, withdrawing troops from Germany. And we didn't expand it an inch to the east. We expanded it 1,000 miles to the east, as Mr. Kennedy has said, and we've added all kinds of countries into NATO. Now, Lev, you were talking about kind of what would the U.S. do? All right, situation reverse, situation reverse. If the Soviet Union had won the Cold War and then started expanding the Warsaw Pact in violation of its promises ever further towards the United States, and even up to the point of threatening that Mexico and or Canada would join the Warsaw Pact, okay, how would we react? Would a U.S. president tolerate an alliance between Mexican troops and Russia?
Matthew,
No, so, what?
Matthew, I'm gonna
Can,
give you about 60 seconds to finish up because I do want to move the topic back. But go ahead.
Well,
yeah,
I
and I'd
just
like to
hold on.
respond to
I
Sarah
just want
quickly.
to hold on. I just want to say I've been sitting here listening to a whole lot about this topic, and I cannot possibly finish what I'm about to say in 60 seconds to really address the history. I need more like 2 to 3 minutes because there's a lot here. Okay, and
Yeah,
I'd
but
appreciate that because I've listened to a whole lot that's just been wrong, and I'd like a
You
chance to
also
rebut
had a
it.
chance to speak as well, just to be
Yeah,
fair.
Matthew, and to be fair, Matthew, a lot of the history you're talking about is irrelevant. The bottom line, what you're
No,
saying
it's
is
not. No,
it
it's
is,
not,
and
Lev.
I'll tell you
No,
why.
no, let me finish my
I'll,
point, Lev. This was
I'll
not.
answer you. You asked one question. Let me answer it, and I'll tell you.
I
Because
didn't ask a question. I was making a
okay,
point. I was
okay,
making
go
a
ahead.
point. I was here.
Go ahead. I'll answer you. Go ahead.
Any U.S. president would have invaded Mexico or Canada if the leaders of Mexico or Canada said we're making a military alliance with Russia. So on the eve of this invasion, in January of 2022, before Russia invaded, Russia gave the United States an ultimatum. The ultimatum in writing from Russia's diplomat was make a statement that Ukraine is not going to join NATO. The U.S. has wanted this war from the very beginning. The U.S. wanted this to take
But
place.
Ukraine is not
And
part
so,
of NATO.
excuse me,
Ukraine's not part of NATO.
the point was Russia wanted assurances Ukraine wouldn't join
But
NATO because
Lithuania
they feel
is part of
threatened by
NATO.
it.
Finland is
Because
part of NATO.
I'm not talking
And they're
about.
on
I'm
the border.
saying
But why is he not
Russia.
invading
Excuse
them?
me, Lev. Russia feels threatened by the idea of Ukraine joining a military alliance with the United States. We would feel
Why Ukraine or
exactly
why
the
not
same way.
Lithuania? But
Exactly
tell
the
me.
same way.
But no. But
Excuse
you
me,
said
Lev.
Mexico. You
Lev,
wouldn't care. No. But
my.
with all the, you, go,
I'm sorry. I first time I've hit the mute button. I want to keep it respectful, and I want the dialogue to continue respectfully, kindly.
let's go back and forth, but in 30-second
Yeah,
clips, so we're not
I would
spending
agree.
3 minutes each on responding to
Please.
each other. Ask, make a point, and I'll respond to it, and then you can respond also. Let's do that, Matt.
You have to unmute your mic,
Go ahead, Matt.
Matt. There's a delay, and you
Go
have
ahead,
to
Matt.
unmute. You have to click it again.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so I'll make my point in 30 seconds and then let you go. So my first point is in a theoretical scenario in which the Soviet Union had won the Cold War and promised to the United States as part of us winning the Cold War that they would not expand the Warsaw Pact, and then they expanded the Warsaw Pact encompassed numerous former members of NATO, and then Mexico had made a pledge that they wanted to join the Warsaw Pact, and the Soviet Union said, open door policy, you can join, and then the U.S. diplomat had said, please, Soviet Union, please make a pledge that Mexico will not join the Warsaw Pact. And the Soviet Union spat in the U.S. face and said, you know what, we think it's totally fine, open door policy for Mexico to join. And on top of that, there were Americans inside Mexico who Mexican Nazis were attacking. The U.S. would not put up with that, and the U.S. would have invaded Mexico, and that's the situation reversed.
Okay.
Your turn.
First of all, Ukrainians are not Nazis. There's Nazis in every country, so let's start off with that. The majority of Ukraine is not Nazis, and the Banderitsa is a very small fraction of what you're talking about. Second of all, when you're talking about the Warsaw Pact, it wouldn't matter. I agree with you. America would attack. It wouldn't matter if it was Canada or if it was in Mexico. If America's border was being threatened, America would attack. But that's not the case that's going on in Russia and Ukraine, because 800 miles of Russia is surrounded by NATO countries, and Putin is not attacking those countries. So he's attacking Ukraine. And Ukraine is not even a NATO country. So we could talk hypotheticals all you want, but reality is what reality is. There was conversation, but the conversation that doesn't give him a right to invade. And if he was so worried about NATO's countries coming in and invading and being on his borders, he could have attacked any one of those other countries, like Poland, that's right there by his side, Lithuania, that's on his border, Finland is on his border, and so on and so on. But he didn't. There's a reason behind it. It's because he wants Ukraine because of its natural resources, because of Ukraine's positioning, bringing back the Soviet Union together, and that's the bottom line. So it's he's using excuses for that on the West right now, certain politicians are using for their political gain, and spewing all this stuff, saying, "Oh well, because we shouldn't have been speaking to Putin like that." That's not the case.
So, Lev, first of all, there are, in fact, Ukrainian open neo-Nazis that are part of the military. That's not the case in the U.S. and anywhere else that I'm aware of in the world. There are literally, the Azov battalion is neo-Nazi. There's a law, okay, that makes it illegal to arm them. We used to say we will never arm them, and we started violating that law in 2022. We said, to heck with it. We're now arming them directly. We're going to override our own law. That's the first point. The second point is that U.S. diplomats, and I believe George Kennan was one of them, if I remember correctly, and maybe Lori can correct me on this, have specifically said that for many, many, many years before this all happened, that Ukraine joining NATO was the brightest of red lines. Why was it the brightest of red lines? Because Russia has historically been repeatedly attacked out of Ukraine. The last time historically that they were attacked out of Ukraine was when the Nazi army came in and killed, I don't know the exact number. Is it 10? Is it 20 million? It was millions and millions of Russians who died in World War II when the Nazis attacked Russia out of Ukraine. So you're kind of changing the subject here, Lev. The subject is Ukraine. The subject is Ukraine was the brightest of red lines after we promised over and over again
we never
that we would
crossed the
not
line.
expand. Excuse me. We said, they came to us and they said repeatedly, you have to pledge that Ukraine will not join NATO. And we spat in their face. Excuse me, they spat. Let me finish my point. No, in January of 2022, Russia's diplomats sent a letter with an ultimatum saying, you must pledge to us in writing that Ukraine will not join NATO. And our response was, it is an open door policy for Ukraine to join NATO. And this was after we had for decades violated all of our promises. We lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. And O'Keefe Media just put out a video showing, okay, that BlackRock is profiting off of the destruction of Ukraine's wheat supply. So this is entirely a racket. It's a scam to enrich the military-industrial complex and BlackRock, and the American people.
Russia doesn't lie. China doesn't lie. But they all lie.
Excuse me. I said the U.S. We lie. Excuse me, Lev. You're not responding.
Hold on a second. Hold on 1 second. What is your thesis? Okay. Can you RFK? And I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know your actual name, and I don't have my glasses on. Matthew. Thank you. Well, you present a scenario which is it's not crazy, meaning you're reversing the situation. That's not really how we justify actions, but I was following what you were saying, and no, the U.S. wouldn't be happy about that. But what is it that you are arguing? What is the point you're trying to make with respect to all of this? That Russia should have invaded, or was correct to invade, or what is it? Because I'm a bit confused.
Let me just say
the point is that we provoked the war. The point is we provoked it. The U.S. provoked this war intentionally over years. We have so many internal documents within that U.S. diplomats wrote decades ago saying we cannot let Ukraine join NATO or Russia will invade. We actually have a paper trail of this. John Mearsheimer has been talking about this for years. You can find John Mearsheimer videos going back 5-10 years ago where he said the U.S. is provoking Russia into attacking Ukraine. His comment was Ukraine is going to get wrecked by Russia because Russia can never, under any circumstances, tolerate Ukraine being part of NATO. And
Matthew,
and yet Ukraine is not part of NATO and hasn't been part of NATO.
And they were just at the NATO conference. They weren't denied again. And also, let's talk about red lines. 1 second, Sarah, please. You've said that we crossed the red line by saying that it's an open door policy. We've crossed the red line during this war many times, but Russia set so many red lines. If we give weapons, if we continue giving weapons, if we give tanks, if we give these type of weapons, if now we're going to be sending F-16, those are all red lines. But Putin doesn't seem to be crossing them now. So you're saying that Putin has the right now, because we crossed those red lines, because we're supporting Ukraine, he could go use nuclear weapons, because that's what he said he's going to do if we cross the red lines.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not
Correct.
saying that.
So
Let
it's
me say
not
what I
just
am saying. Let me clarify what I am saying. What I am saying is in January of 2022, Russia's diplomat sent a letter. I want to emphasize a letter, words. The words said, we are giving you, the United States, an ultimatum. Assure us that Ukraine will not join NATO. We need that assurance because we are scared. They were afraid of even the possibility. This is what happened. There's a letter. You can go read
please, come on. Russia was afraid.
I mean, they didn't say that in the letter, but that's what's going on.
You expect America, the greatest country in the world, to be bowed down to Russia because they wrote a letter? And in the letter,
and so are you in favor of World War III? Do you like the fact that we're
no? But that's what.
So do you think maybe we should have given them the assurance that Ukraine won't join NATO?
And what if tomorrow Russia writes a letter and saying,
"Excuse me, Lev, do you think we should have? Do you think it might have been a good idea that we would have given them the assurance that Ukraine won't join NATO after we had lied and expanded NATO for decades and expanded it 1,000 miles?
Matthew, why do you think NATO was expanded? Why did all these countries join NATO in the first place? Like, why do you think they joined NATO?
You know, I don't know the answer to everyone's motivations involved with that
because they're scared
obviously.
of
Hold
Russia.
on, okay.
I'm telling you the answer because they're scared of Russia.
Hold on a second. We, the United States, the greatest power in the world, as you've said, gave Russia an ironclad guarantee we would not expand NATO an inch to the east. That was the promise we made.
Are you familiar with the Budapest Memorandum at all, Matthew? Which is much more ironclad. Like, are you aware? Okay, so this is so there was an agreement that was much more recent and much more ironclad. So Ukraine gave up their nukes in exchange. This was a deal that was made with Russia, a deal that was assured by the U.S. as well as several other countries. And in that deal, there was a guarantee that Russia would not invade Ukraine in exchange for Ukraine giving up its nukes. Those nukes were given up. And then in 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine.
Exactly.
So here you go.
And that's the biggest thing that I want to add, Kat, if I may interrupt, that we're talking about a 2020 letter and we're talking about a war that supposedly invasion started in 2022. This invasion started in 2014. Before any of this that you're saying, Matthew, took place.
When Victoria Nuland helped overthrow Ukraine's government. And there's plenty of video evidence of that. There's plenty of video evidence of this. No gaslighting. No gaslighting. Victoria Nuland was involved. Victoria Nuland, there was video of this.
Matthew, you need to take a beat here. Okay? You need to take a beat. You're not going to harass the co-host, period. So just calm down a minute. You've been allowed to speak. You'll be allowed to speak. We're gonna hear from you. We care about what you have to say, just like we care about everyone else. But take it down a couple notches, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And
just
so my
1
point
second
is,
before you go, Matthew, and I promise I will give you your chance to speak. I do want to take the tone down a bit. I just want some nice, respectful conversation. These types of conversations tend to get heated. I do want to finish up with talking about Ukraine, and take the conversation back. Matthew, I'll let you finish up. Lev, I'll let you respond, and then if we could please take it back to the presidential candidates. Thank you. Go ahead, Matthew.
Absolutely,
sounds
good.
So thank you. So we have video of Victoria Nuland talking about who is going to be the next leader of Ukraine when she and the neocons and the CIA planned the coup. And I also wanted to say my point about Russia being afraid, they didn't put that in the letter. That's just the psychological analysis that was developed by numerous American diplomats saying Russia doesn't want to re-experience the trauma they experienced from World War II when the Nazis came in and killed millions of their people. And if we can have any empathy, this is what John Kennedy talked about, was strategic empathy, putting yourself in the shoes of the other. He talked about that in his World Peace speech on June 10th, 1963. And I think we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the Russians and understand they have valid and legitimate security needs just like we do. We wouldn't be okay with Russians having a military alliance with Mexico, and Russia's not okay with Ukraine having any form of military alliance with the United States, period.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I'm just going to quickly respond, and then we'll move on to the topic of 2021. So first of all, as far as putting yourself in the other people's shoes, put yourself in the shoes of all those million of Ukrainians that are displaced and dying, and not just about Russia, but put your shoes in there and the families that are being lost and all of the atrocities that are being happened. And second of all, most of the case that you were talking about until Catherine very nicely came out and intelligently it talked about the Ukraine giving up their nukes and assurances that Russia wouldn't invade, and that Russia did invade. Before that, your main argument was that Russia wrote a letter in 2020 wanting assurances before they invaded. Then when we said that they invaded in 2014, you backtracked and you went to Victoria Nuland, overthrew this. What I'm saying to you is the bottom line is that Russia always wanted to take over Ukraine. These are all political conversations going back and forth of reasoning. The bottom line is you could make points from one side to the other, but nobody wants war. We all want peace. We all want, but unfortunately, right now, there's nobody to speak to on the other side, on the Russian side, to be able to negotiate a proper peace. And once we have that, hopefully we will have peace. But right now, the only way we could save millions of lives and keep Russia from becoming a monster powerhouse down the road and becoming the old Soviet Union is to back Ukraine any way we can to be able to stop them from spreading further. And I'll end with that, and then let's continue about 2024.
You know, there was a peace negotiation that was going on, okay, in April of 2022, directly between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and the United States sent Boris Johnson in, and Boris Johnson told Zelensky, end the negotiations. We are going to continue to fund this war. The Ukrainian side had signed a peace agreement, but we wanted more war. So I find everything you're saying to be disingenuous around the topic of peace and sympathizing with the Ukrainians
I'm
because...
not going to let you go. There, I'm not going to let you go because I know Zelensky personally, and he was no way he didn't sign any peace agreement with Russia. This was conversation, and part of that peace agreement is Russia wanted to control portions of Ukraine, and Ukraine did not want that, never went. And what Boris Johnson did is just upheld the Ukrainian people and Zelensky and told them that you don't have to sign and give up everything. We will support you for your freedom and your sovereignty. So let's stop at that and let's move on to the next subject. And you don't have to get water if you want to get a drink. I know my co-host here like to.
Also, I wanted to ask, how many Canadians are we allowing on?
Oh, we're allowing them all. We're now Canadian space.
Oh my God.
I think the whole space needs a J. The whole space needs a J.
You know, I have to say, I used to get people used to get mad at me because they're like, how dare Canadians speak on American politics? Which, by the way, I disclose very freely. But now I think some people have started saying that we are just part of the U.S. So
you are the Northern United States, right? Isn't that the current rhetoric?
All right.
You're the
you know what they say.
You
know what they say about Canada. They say when the U.S. gets a cold, Canada gets the flu.
It's true. I mean,
it's true.
We're just powerless. Like, we can't vote, but we basically, like, everything that happens in the U.S., exactly what you said is absolutely true, but we can't vote. So we feel very powerless. So we just, like, watch from afar and hope that you guys do the right thing.
I know. And because it's so important, whoever our leader is, when we have a good leader, it's good for Canada. When we have a bad leader, it's bad for Canada. And
we want you to have good times, right? Yeah, sorry, Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like, the Biden years have been terrible in U.S.-Canada relations. And I'm not a fan of Justin Trudeau. One of the big reasons that I stand for Kennedy is I feel that he could actually work with Justin Trudeau. They have a lot in common. Their families have been friendly for decades. The Trudeaus and the Kennedys have always had a great relationship. So that I see some hope there for our two countries. If anybody can talk sense to Justin Trudeau, it might be Robert F. Kennedy.
Well, I'm going to put it out there. I'll vote for any president that legalized cannabis. So
did you hear that? Lev is voting for Trudeau. Okay, I do want to
All the
say
way.
something though. I know that you have to leave, Matthew. You wanted some final thoughts, so I'll go to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And, I just wanted to say about debates, I am glad to hear, Lev, that you and I agree on that topic, even if we disagree on other ones. Here's my big take about why Biden owes Bobby Kennedy a debate. And here it is, real simple. In 2020, a proxy war with Russia wasn't on the ballot. In 2020, censoring political rivals and working with the FBI and the CIA to censor social media and YouTube videos was not on the ballot. No one voted for those things. So on those two topics, at minimum, the voters need to be able to weigh in, because the Democratic National Committee, by not holding debates, think about it. Here's the message they're sending to Democrats. They're saying, if you want a president who is opposed to arming this proxy war against Russia, if you want a president who is for peace and is also for free speech, pound sand. Leave the Democratic Party and go find a Republican or a third party candidate who might support those values. They're basically, the DNC is saying it's war or war. It's censorship or censorship. It's Biden or Biden. This is autocracy. The Democratic Party is not the party of John F. Kennedy or Robert F. Kennedy. It is descended into authoritarianism. So Biden owes Bobby Kennedy a debate because these issues were not things he ran on. And it should be the Democratic Party should weigh in on what kind of president that they actually want, and shouldn't be forced to go look outside the party through a lack of debates.
Quick question, Matthew, and I agree with you that they should debate. But if RFK knows that and knows that the way the system is set up, why is he running as a Democrat? Why not run as an independent?
Well, I don't speak for him, so I can speculate only a little bit. I mean, he is trying to, I believe, restore the party of his uncle and his father and of Dr. Martin Luther King. He calls himself a Kennedy Democrat, and he's created a distinction around what kind of values those are. And he's trying to, I think, reform the Democratic Party. And I think there is an analogy to Trump here, just in terms of Trump kind of was an outsider when he ran, and he was standing for things that were quite different from Republican orthodoxy. One of the biggest ones was, the war machine, and saying, hey, maybe we need a Republican Party that isn't constantly supporting wars the way George W. Bush did. And the way he took down Jeb Bush in that first debate, you could kind of see he was standing for a different version of republicanism, and he won that conversation. So I think Kennedy is standing for a different version of being a Democrat, which is both new and old. It's the Democratic Party of JFK, RFK, FDR, and Martin Luther King. And we need that. We need a Democratic Party that is revitalized and resurrected in that manner to have a healthy political system in our country. And he's also trying to unite Americans. He's really saying there are a set of values here that could bring Americans together, so that we're not constantly hating each other and blaming each other and going at each other's throats, and actually coming together around a certain set of values that would bring Americans together. So, and I just wanted to also apologize before I go. Can I just take a moment and say, Lev, I apologize that I got so heated there. And I had to take a moment and figure out why it was. I have some very intense feelings as an American Jew who has ancestors who suffered in pogroms and genocide. And I get really angry when I hear people deny that there are Nazis in Ukraine, and in fact, there are neo-Nazis. And worshiping Stepan Bandera is a very painful topic for me. It is going on amongst these Ukrainian Nazis. It is extremely widespread. And Stepan Bandera genocided a bunch of my ancestors, essentially, because I actually come from Ukraine. Like 2/3 of my family comes from Ukraine 4 generations back. So that's
Matthew,
why I got
thank
so
you so
upset.
much for that. I appreciate that. And I want you to know, on that point, I stand with you 100%. There are Banderas, but I just want to say there's Nazis in the United States. There's Nazis all over the world. And they're all, I agree with you, are terrible. So let's agree to disagree. And I also apologize if I got a little heated, very heated subject. So let's move on. Thank you so much. I want to throw a question out there for maybe Kyle or Lori. If RFK doesn't get the nominee, which, it's a surprise if he would, because we understand because of what's going on. Who do you vote for then, Biden or Trump, if it's a Biden-Trump election?
Go ahead, Kyle.
You mean, yeah, you want to
Well, I
take,
mean,
well,
I can't even
you
vote,
can't
but
vote.
Who would your ideal
I can't
Point
candidate
vote,
of
but
be
I
correction.
then
will.
if RFK does not get the nomination?
Or your wife and
Yeah.
kids could vote.
I mean, my wife can vote, and I mean, obviously, like, it's like, there's a good question asked of RFK, like, will you endorse whoever is the nominee if you're not the nominee? He's like, absolutely not. Like, that's ridiculous. I think if he doesn't get the nomination, it's looking at contingency plans and alternatives. But I'll also say, like, there's if if we're at the beginning of, in my opinion, what's going to be kind of a very large grassroots movement. And, over the next couple months, you will see the power of the people. Politics is a talent show, and is a game of talent, and the best talent that you can surround yourself with gives you the best odds of it. And, fortunately for Bobby, based on, his character and his integrity and his words that he's using, he's attracting people from all sides of the debate. And the DNC, as it continues to block, will just be shown to be an increasingly kind of corrupt, centralized organization. And we need more decentralization in totality within the system. There's so much, like, this whole idea that every 4 years you can just vote for one person and your job's done. Like, that's not democracy. I look at Switzerland and their ideals of direct democracy and the ability for referendums. The reason why we have this system, it was invented in an age when, we did not even have the telegraph. It took in 1878, it took 92 hours to get from San Francisco to New York. Now we can send a message instantly from one side of the country to the other. I think it's time to start looking at new models. As Bucky Fuller said, you can't fix a system by fighting it. To truly change something, build new models that make the existing one obsolete. And I feel like, we're approaching this tipping point, that there might be a new 1776 moment in America, and it might be the DNC, is its own demise as a result. But I would not write off Bobby at this time, because he is pulling in, and I've seen it out there on the road from all sides. People are attracted to the message of unity and coming together and rising above the divisive politics and the divisive nature of the current corporatocracy, and this of the party, by the party, for the party, of the corporation, by the party, corporation, for the corporation system that we're operating in right now. And there's a need to return to some of the roots of this great nation of America. And I mean, I'm in Canada as well. So I'm not saying I just blindly like say, okay, yeah, let's all throw our support behind Trump. No, I think there's some things brewing right now. And we're at a very pivotal time in history, as we've always been. But I am an optimist, and I believe that great things are coming our way. And I would not write off Bobby as the nominee. His father was on the track to become the nominee against an incumbent and was assassinated for that. I do not, maybe third time's the charm with the Kennedys in terms of actually bringing us together, healing the divide.
Amen to that. Amen to that, Kyle. And I just wanted to try and answer Lev's question. I'm hoping and pushing Bobby Kennedy to run independent or third party, to just leave the Democratic Party, as painful as that is. And I know it's painful for him, being a generational Democrat. But this is not the party of the Kennedys anymore. That's obvious. They don't want him. The top Democratic Party movers and shakers and strategists and power brokers are all telling him to leave. They're begging him to leave the Democratic Party. They're like, go run Republican. So I don't want to see him run Republican necessarily. I'd like to see him go independent or third party. Of course, the problem with going independent is ballot access. There are some states that just will not let independent candidates on the ballot. So that would conceivably cripple him. It would leave him being a write-in candidate in some states. He needs to be with a party that has ballot access in all 50 states, and we all know how difficult that is to get. So I would like, my personal preference would be, I'd like to see him seek the nomination of the Libertarian Party, my party, A lot of us would love to have him. I think he would be nominated to run with our party. And we have ballot access in all 50 states, and we're the only third party that does.
And I think that might be the contingency plan too, Lori. He was just speaking at Freedom Fest in Memphis today, but
Yeah.
Really to break this uniparty and to like prevent another steal, whether you believe the last one was stolen or not. The only way you can really prevent that is, I mean, you just speaking to the last election, it's not that 80 million people voted for Biden. It's that 80 million people voted against Trump. There's so much polarization and so much hate towards that man that anything on the other side would have been good. Bobby is different and he can really bring people together. And I swear that DNC party is scared of the message right now because, it's a house of cards and, so there's that threat. But the best strategy, in my opinion, for him right now is what he's doing exactly this, is go for that Democratic nomination, go full force for it, and, do everything you can to take back the party of your father and your uncle.
That's right. I agree with that. I think somebody needs to do it. Who better to do it than Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? If he can't fix the Democratic Party, then it can't be fixed. And yes, then he should leave. But the difficulty is the timing. The Democratic Party convention is in August, I believe, Chicago. The Republican convention is a month before that. So if he wanted to go Republican, it would be too late. They would have already selected their nominee. If he doesn't decide early in the spring, at least, maybe even before that, he wouldn't be able to seek the Libertarian nomination because our party convention is Memorial Day weekend at the end of May. So we would have already selected our nominee. The Democrats go last this time. So if he waits until after the Democratic Party convention, if he goes there and he loses and they hand him his hat and show him the door, where will he go then? It'll be too late to get ballot access as an independent. It'll be too late to run with the Republicans or the Greens or the Libertarians. So he'd pretty much not have a chance at that point. He needs to decide a lot sooner. In fact, very soon.
And he needs to, in building a gigantic grassroots campaign, collect the information on, 10 to 20% of Americans and be able to have a mighty force. Trump was able to amass 90 million people's data in his campaign, and through that data was able to activate anytime he went anywhere, was able to do it. So there is a data science element towards all of this as well. And the thing is, we're mid-July right now. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of opportunities for the DNC and for Biden to, anything can happen. He's an old man. He's things could happen. And, every day that, Biden continues to go, RFK gets stronger in the Democratic race. And as soon as, if he does pull out and say, Hillary or a Newsom or a Kerry or whoever, whatever, system, big Democrat they pull out of the hat, to be the chosen one, it's going to, then there absolutely must be debates. So, we'll see.
Well, I think Tucker Carlson should host a Democratic Party candidates debate. Of course, the Democratic Party has already said they've made up their minds. President Biden has said no to debates. There just won't be any officially sanctioned debates this year by the Democratic Party.
Why do you think that, Lori? I'm curious why you say that.
It's been the official.
That Tucker Carlson should moderate the Democratic debates.
I think it'd be perfect. I think it's obviously he did really well with the Republican Forum with the Blaze the other night. Last night, I guess it was. I would love to see him do the same for the Democrats. I think that would, give everybody a fair playing field.
Sorry about that. The reason that I ask is because your question helps the argument of some that RFK is not really a Democratic candidate. Not really. He appeals more to Republicans. So it was interesting for me to hear you say that someone like Tucker Carlson should moderate a Democratic debate. I actually think that's a horrible idea. No offense to you, with all due
Right?
respect.
No, I see exactly
I think
what
that
you're saying.
you can't have a moderator who is completely critical of everything, of the policies in any way. By the way,
Well,
on
that's
the
a good
flip side,
point.
I would
And,
say the same
we
thing
don't
about,
even know if, say,
like,
Marianne
what's her
Williamson
name?
would
Rachel,
agree.
the person I can't stand. This Maddow, like Rachel Maddow, moderating a debate of Republican candidates. I mean,
It
it
would
would be a
actually
complete
be
shit
kind
show,
of,
I think. But
I will
anyway.
say, it would actually be kind of interesting to see what it would look like if, I mean, it would be bad actually if, like, say, somebody like Tucker was, or whoever, I don't think Tucker should be the one, but if it was a Republican moderator, doing like the Democrats, and then the Democratic kind of moderator doing the Republicans, but as long as they didn't have a favoritized candidate, because actually that would be somebody who doesn't kind of align with either, would be kind of interesting to see. Um, hmm.
Absolutely. Hey, what if Tucker forked this whole thing and was like, okay, I'm going to have Vivek debate Kennedy and I'll be the moderator. Let's go, like a one-on-one. That would cause ripples
It
across
would.
I don't
everything.
think it should be Tucker because I've seen how Tucker dealt with Tate. But it's somebody who would actually push back a bit on the questions, and maybe he would do it he wouldn't do it. See, I think he would favoritize RFK, which I don't think is fair in that kind of debate situation. But I think if somebody was completely indifferent to, or just equally disliked but all the Democratic candidates, that would actually be pretty interesting.
It would. And, our media landscape is so polarized, just like the rest of the country, that, of course, the first question that would naturally come to mind is why would Democratic candidates agree to go on the show of a former Fox News host?
They wouldn't, and it would be the same. Like, for example, if you had a Democratic host do the debates for Republicans, like I would see, like, for example, Trump is very hated, right? And so it would probably be set up more against, say, somebody like Trump. So, like, it probably wouldn't work. But if it was a more fair environment, it would actually be quite interesting to see
And
sort of grills by the opposite side.
And it's kind of like that for Republicans every time they have to go do a big debate on MSNBC or CNN. They feel like they're coming into a hostile environment because those networks hate Republicans. And yet, if we do our jobs properly as journalists, we can give them a fair hearing and host a fair debate, regardless of our personal party preferences. That's the way it ought to be.
It
I
ought to be, as long as you're being fair and honest in your questioning, and you're not like putting in a narrative and a spin. So I think that is the role of good journalism, especially in an interview context.
Well, remember when Fox News did a town hall with Bernie Sanders and the left lost their minds about that? I mean, Bernie took so much flack just for agreeing to go on Fox News and do a town hall. That's how polarized our media landscape
Yeah,
is
Joe
now.
Rogan got
It's
Joe
sad.
Rogan got a lot of crap for having Bernie on and then actually endorsing Bernie in 2016 as well.
I remember.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I've been thinking, like, there's stuff I get invited to where I'm like, and I've turned certain things down, and I think about it, I'm like, I feel guilty sometimes, right? I don't know. It's kind of hard because there is consequences for doing certain things, and they come back to bite you. But
Yeah, it makes you wonder,
yeah.
would Marianne Williamson ever agree to do a debate hosted by Tucker Carlson? It would be a chance for her and Kennedy to face off. And, of course, an invitation would be extended to President Biden, but he'd say no. So it'd probably just be the two of them.
It could happen.
And honestly, if it was the two of them, that would be good. And if Biden and if you were to see Bobby debate some Republicans on the other side, and there be this forked version in an unofficial, non-mainstream sanctioned thing,
Now
I
you're
think
talking.
we would see some strong resonance, and also like that would continue to be a threat towards like the castle in which Biden currently sits.
Well, and I
more
love
open,
it
honest
because it
discussion.
gives a big middle finger to the Commission on Presidential Debates. If we could have someone like Tucker Carlson hosted, it would get a larger audience than anything that the television networks could do, and all of those CPD debates would be meaningless. And I'm all for that. I'm all in for that.
And I think that if I weren't concerned with someone like Tucker Carlson, who's an excellent interviewer, and I think who could do a great job. If I weren't concerned with him making a mockery of the whole thing, right, making everybody there look like a fool. I mean, some of them are fools, so let's not lie. But then I actually think that's actually a very good idea. But that would be my only concern. Like, is he going to basically show this charade of characters?
Yeah, Tucker could go into conspiracy theory really quickly, very fast, and way out there. That's the problem.
You don't.
I mean, if he,
You don't need a moderator.
yeah, go ahead, Doc.
You don't need a moderator. Do a Lincoln Douglas type, and if the mainstream media won't cover it, you do it here on a space. It may not get millions of views initially, but it will eventually.
Ooh, that's a neat idea. I like that.
Well, one thing I want to say though is that, whether or not somebody like Tucker Carlson should moderate a Democratic debate, or vice versa, like a Rachel Maddow should moderate a Republican, I find it so offensive when journalists want to speak with candidates who are not supposed to be on their side, right? And there's this public outrage. Like, if Tucker Carlson wants to have Marianne Williamson or someone on his show and there's an outrage over it, I'm rooting for the guy. Like, I'm rooting for the interview, because I don't know who gets to say that that's not okay when you're touting free speech and all this stuff. So I kind of like to see that when someone like a Joe Rogan says, you know what, I'm bringing Bernie Sanders, and then there's all this craziness, and it still does happen. So I just, I
Sphinx,
don't like.
you're right, because when I hear people being outraged about who is speaking or being interviewed by what show, it tends to make me want to listen to it even more.
Yeah, and it's a form of societal bullying, like the sort of like holier than thou. How, no, that's not okay. That's not okay. And it's like, you don't make up the rules here. We're trying to have discourse, and I think there are more avenues now than there were, let's say, 20 years ago.
It is, but yeah, but you also have to be kind of careful, because sometimes you have to consider also, like, how is that conversation going to be, like, is the host going to let you actually speak?
Says the
Right?
woman that went on
Complete your
Tim Pool.
sentences.
I mean, you can hide under the covers all you
Are you
want.
talking about me, or are you talking about the other woman,
I'm talking
Emma?
about you specifically. You can hide under the covers, but we all heard it. So
No, but the point, Catherine, you're making is, if the candidate, right, thinks that's not a wise choice. I'm talking about outside, like pundits and stuff, and people saying,
oh yeah. Well, you get pressure. I mean, look, people will tell you, like, why would you go? There's no point. Like, why would you speak to these people? Like, and then you have to be kind of strong. And honestly, I found that if you come and you do have a reason, like, if you've thought through your reasons as to why you do what you do, and your reasons are pure, then you tell people that. Honestly, like, it's different. You get actually a different reaction. If you're just doing it to get, like, attention, you're not gonna get a good response. But if you're doing it because, like, for example, when I do it, it's because I believe in discourse, and I believe in speaking to other people, and getting, understanding other people's perspectives. And honestly, when I explain that to the people who sort of criticize me going on speaking to the quote unquote other side, once I explain that to them, the reaction does kind of change. They might go, well, I don't have as much faith in positivity as you, and you're kind of naive and idealistic, but they no longer kind of mad at me for doing
right.
it.
Well, remember, I mean, Tucker Carlson was watched by more Democrats when he was on Fox News then Democrats would watch MSNBC
Is
or
that
CNN.
actually true? I kept
But
hearing
I
that,
can't
and I
find
found
that
it hard to
data.
believe it.
I could not find that data as well. I looked for that. I heard that before, and I searched for it, and I don't know.
You get
He is
more
loved by conservatives.
you get more respect going into the opposite camp and holding yourself and your principles up to be challenged.
Uh,
If people don't like that from the left, then they need to look in the mirror and find some support for their own
I look, I
positions.
am for anybody doing any interview which is going to bring out at least some of their views that's not necessarily an echo chamber.
Do the Dems do people really believe that Biden's got a chance against Trump, like in a proper couple of hour debates, like however they're going to play out? Someone said RFK should run as a libertarian. Like, no, it's just not realistic. Like, he won't win as a libertarian. Like, respect the Libertarian Party, love lots of aspects, but no, don't that ain't going to happen. Yeah, many Dems we've seen outside of America just purely vote down party lines. There's got to be a percentage. You have to admit to that. And I respect that. Like in the 2017 election, like when it was so divisive, there were Republicans who maybe didn't like Trump morally or whatever, but that helped their healthcare practice or on whatever policy lines they voted down. So it does seem tough for someone who's to cross the party lines. And they've obviously tried to throw everything at Trump, what we've seen. Like we just see throw after throw after throw, and he just seems to come out unscathed. So that's a little bit of some broad non-American perspective.
Thank you. Let me get to you, Kate. Go ahead.
Okay, so I kind of just joined not that long ago, so I'm not sure what all you guys covered, but I did want to mention that I think actually it'd be a great idea if we had somebody from the opposite side. I don't know who brought that up, maybe Sphinx, like having the debates run by, like moderated by someone from the other side. The only thing that you would have to try and find balance is like somebody that's not going to be like just looking for like gotcha questions, but at the same time I think those are important, but so that it wouldn't be like, I don't know, like a disingenuous sort of gotcha questions. Like I think we do need to have somebody asking like the tough questions that someone on the same side as the candidate maybe wouldn't press them on. I did think that the Blaze TV forum, or I don't know if you want to call that debates, that they had today, I think that was today, I thought that was like really done nicely by Tucker Carlson, and I felt like even though they were candidates that are maybe more aligned with him, that he did still push them on like a lot of major issues. Like, you know, I know he pushed Pence, and he said some ridiculous things, but I'm almost at the point where like I don't think that I don't feel like I can even think of a single person that would be able to do that the way that like we're so divided nowadays. I mean, someone mentioned Rachel Maddow, like she literally was on MSNBC saying like, oh, well, you know, Trump is giving this speech, but we know he's going to be just spreading a whole bunch of lies and misinformation. So we're not even going to show you. But if he says anything that's not a lie, maybe we'll cut back over to that. And I just thought that was like super disingenuous. And like, if you're about free speech, like just let everybody talk. I'd really love to see everyone just like go out on the stage and get asked all of the toughest questions, and like maybe try and expose all of them so we can see like what's really going on, instead of just hearing these like curated questions and like them spewing talking points. Because the debates to me have seemed like so recited over the last election, even like the gubernatorial like election. Like I thought all of that seemed so scripted and fake, and I just want to see like real answers. Like maybe they should all just have to sit down and do like a 3-hour Joe Rogan style podcast where like you can really dig deep into stuff, because I'm just tired of hearing like talking points and no real solutions or like plans laid out whenever we have all these candidates. Because I mean, obviously I'm a libertarian, and you know, Tyrone was up here crushing my dreams that we're not going to win the presidency this year. I really thought maybe this year we could do it. I'm just kidding. But like seriously, I don't think any of these candidates like are appealing at all. Like at all.
Well, they probably don't want anything other than a scripted sort of debate, because look how quickly in an open forum Mike Pence and Asa Hutchinson At least those two just totally
Dude,
destroyed their
didn't Pence
candidacy
literally
today.
say that like America wasn't his? No, like that's not my issue, right? That's not my
He
like
said it
what?
twice. He said it twice. He repeated
I
it.
just wanted to say that I mentioned Rachel Maddow, but said she would be horrible and that I can't stand her, for the record.
So I have a perfect solution to all your American problems, okay?
Move to
Take it from a
Canada? Is
Canadian.
that it?
Wait, you're
Well,
Canadian?
Oh,
yeah.
Doc.
Oh,
You
okay.
didn't, Doc, you
Kick
didn't
her
know this
out.
the
Kick
whole
Doc,
her
you
ass
just
out.
wake up, Doc.
Wow, the
You
fullest
know, I'm a
warning.
little slow, but I'm going to get there.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is my perfect solution. Let me host the debates as an outsider, not, well, I am invested as we've established because I do care as America sneezes, we catch the cold. But, I'm not a voter yet. I will probably be in the near future, but not currently, not in the next election. So, let
You
me
can
give.
buy as many votes as you want. You just got to know the right
I
people.
I've been told that, but so maybe I'll do that. But why don't I host the debates? But I will do a huddle session with each group on each side, and they can give me some ideas of questions that they would like to ask and get answers to on each side of the aisle. And I will kind of like put together, based on some of those suggestions, some questions and be a moderate kind of voice and you know, do
Yeah,
the
to
yeah.
add to that, might be a great idea since we have all this technology is like have every American like go on Twitter or social media, post their questions, and then the most asked questions that the people want to be asked from both sides to get chosen for the moderator to ask them. So this
I
way
like
it could be
that. Yeah.
generate. So it's not coming from one side or the other; it's coming from the people because at the end of the day, it's the people that want to hear the answers and they're voting for their
I
president.
want them to come to
I
my
think
Twitter
that makes sense.
space. So, Kyle, Lori, you get on the phone with Bobby. You tell him he needs to report here next Friday.
Well, Bobby has already done a Twitter space and we saw how that went. Although, it was supposed to be it was supposed to go
My
differently.
Twitter spaces
I'll
are
leave it
better
at that.
than Elon's. Thank you.
I will say your Twitter space would have been better than Elon's. My Twitter space would have also been better.
What was your impression of Bobby Kennedy's space
I,
appearance?
I I
Curious.
felt that it was more of an interview of Elon, and I thought that was very strange. It felt like he maybe felt obligated to have a conversation with Elon and make it a little bit about Elon. I think it was more about Elon and less about Bobby Kennedy. What do you RFK supporters think? Did you listen to that space?
Yeah, I mean, I listened to it, and honestly, I think Elon like just did not provide any prompts. So RFK actually, Bobby used it as an opportunity just to ask Elon questions, and it started in that way. And I think a lot of people tuned in, and it became an interview of RFK for the first little bit, or I mean, of Elon for the first little bit. But then it definitely turned around, and I think there was some excellent conversation, and I think Spaces is a solid venue for it. But I think there's also like a real element to cameras on as well, which is just something
I
that
can take care of that. I can do it.
spaces lack. And but
I think
overall, I mean,
Elon's
again,
working
it's
on
like
that.
another one. All he does, he just keeps talking. He's talking to everybody he can. And it's just kind of continuing to hit them all. And as he says, this is going to be the podcast presidency, not the mainstream,
Kyle, do you work
prostitute.
officially for the campaign, or are you just doing this on your own?
I'm just doing this on my own.
It's really to irritate his brother.
I'd
No.
like to ask the same question, Lori.
I'm voting for him now because I've changed my mind since being on this space with you. I was going to vote against him, but now I've changed my mind.
Lori,
Okay.
I apologize if you've already answered this, but do you work for the campaign officially as well?
I'm an unpaid. I don't get paid, but I'm a volunteer recruiter for Kennedy 24.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
Oh, I mean, I signed up as a volunteer too, if that means anything.
I think
I'm in
yeah,
this.
you're
I'm
allowed to do that
I'm
as a
in the
foreign
Slack.
national. You just can't
I'm
donate or work for us.
Yeah.
But yeah,
If anybody wants to get involved, you can go to kenny24.com. You can register, get your data, join the Slack, join the Discord, host a local meetup. Get involved however it is. Paint your car, paint your bus, order some stickers, get some merch made. Go out there, hand out brochures, like do whatever it is you got to do, because recognize, Bobby is standing up against the corporatocracy and the official mainstream media that a lot of people look to for validation are, just doing their same old tricks. And know that the polls are all generally run by the parties and the media and the corporations, and it's a virtuous cycle that repeats on itself. And
Hey,
how
Kyle,
how open and fair.
if somebody wants to paint their car, will the who pay for it? Will the campaign pay for it?
No, you should pay for yourself. Just get some
Lev,
paint.
Lev,
You
Lev.
get you get some paint. No, the party didn't. The campaign didn't pay me anything. Then hasn't paid for any of the gas or the paint. I paid artists to get it
Kyle,
done.
Lev was
Hey, I
just
was just
wondering.
We're
yeah,
not
Oh, I
for
know
the
he's. I know he's
I
billionaires,
wasn't
joking,
talking
and
about you,
Kyle.
Kyle.
We're
I
not
wasn't
for
and
the
I
talking about
get
you.
and I
Yeah,
get that too. But
yeah.
it's also, it's like, that's the thing about grassroots politics is like, when you really believe in a cause. And that's why, like, I'll come back, like, reason why I kind of got really into this was like had the same kind of feeling of hope, to like the Ron Paul. But this is the big difference. This is like, this is Kennedy, and he's able to draw from both sides, and he's very strong. He's incredibly fit. He's a sound mind, like through and through, and is attracting incredible people all around him. And everybody's invited, and the whole purpose is to heal the divide and to move past all this nonsense that is dominating, the American psyche, and help us transition forward. So that's the last thing. And I'm going to drop now, guys, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much, Sarah. And just
Thank
as
you,
like
Kyle.
closing remarks, I'd encourage everybody to read the 4 agreements. I'll quickly recite them. The first agreement is be impeccable with your words. Second is don't take anything personally. Third is don't make assumptions. Fourth is always do your best. Just go out there, be awesome. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Farewell.
coming.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Kyle.
Joe Biden.
There's a rumor that he just met with LP National Chair and our executive director, and the I guess the conversation was about if he doesn't make the Democratic primary, um, running as a libertarian.
Is that
We might still see him on the
Yangs?
ballot.
Is
Obviously, it
that
would be
I
up
Andrew
to
think
the
Yang's
I
party.
think
deal?
What?
Lori
Yeah, the former party. There
said a
were
little
rumors
bit of a
about him
twink
with
on that.
the former party as well.
He spoke
Yeah,
at
that's so. Andrew Yang supposedly is
Porkfest.
teasing with that idea. I heard.
Yeah, I mean, our
Hey,
chair
hey,
is totally about it as well. She just did a podcast at Porkfest where RFK spoke and basically said she's 100% behind the idea if he was wanting to, go that direction.
your opinion on that. My question was more leaning towards, and since you voted for RFK in the California,
Well, I
what you
will.
thought
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
or you will, but what is your opinion about what he said specifically that the virus was generated not to affect Jews or the Chinese, about that comment?
I know. I know, as a matter of just my own education and experience and research, that something like that is technically possible.
Is that
Okay,
really what he said,
and
though?
that
Because I thought he said that they were just like genetically more immune to it. I didn't hear him say that it was like specifically curated to not affect those people.
Yeah, just
well,
for clarity, I want to say that I think that he said the group that was least susceptible to it was the Ashkenazi Jews. I want to be clear about that. He did say it was a targeted, which I mentioned this earlier in the space. When you say something is targeted, it's hard to then go and say, well, I don't know if it was intentionally targeted or not, because something that's targeted implies intention. But he didn't say it was made to sort of benefit one group or another. He did say, as you said, Mayor Kate, it was more that certain groups are more susceptible to it and certain groups are less susceptible to it.
yeah, it was vague. It was vague enough to leave it open to interpretation as to exactly what he was intending to specifically allege. I'd agree with you there. But I mean, it wasn't really an interview situation. So, I mean, I haven't seen the larger context of the video. Maybe there were follow-up questions or not. But
I haven't seen the video either, but Kennedy has put out like 5 clarification tweets today, and he's put out 2 more just within the last 5 minutes. In fact, I pinned them to the top of the space if anybody wants to take a look, because there is so much misinterpretation of his remarks and a lot of misunderstanding. He has issued multiple clarifications on that. So I would encourage people to go to Kennedy's Twitter and take a look.
Is he being attacked particularly by anybody or any particular group?
Everyone.
Yeah, everybody. Oh my God, it's insane how this thing blew up.
Not the first time that he. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it's not the first time he's. At the very least, he's tweeted things in the past that kind of came back to bite him, and then he apologized, and then he deleted the apology and the original tweet also. So
right.
Although I'll give him some grace on the particular thing that got him into heat in the first place, because I do think it was probably not intentional. He didn't understand the context of what he was tweeting.
Oh, you're referring to the Roger Waters tweet?
Yeah, I am.
That whole kerfuffle?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, we're not talking about the elephant in the room, which is the fart fest that happened at this same dinner for journalists this week, where these controversial comments were made about the virus. At that same dinner, did you guys see the story in the New York Post?
Did you say fart fest?
Fart, as in, gas.
Okay, I have a feeling that something is
okay.
Something gassy is coming.
A couple of guys at this party who were, I guess, longtime Kennedy supporters, got into a spat over climate change, right? One believed in it, and the other guy didn't believe in it. And it's a couple of old guys, and they were pretty liquored up, had a couple of drinks in them, and next thing you know, they start farting at each other while they're fighting. And then one guy yells, I just farted in your face. I farted in your general direction. And the press had a field day with it, guys. It was so funny. And the New York Post did a hilarious story about that. That's the story we ought to be talking about in the Post, is not this kerfuffle over the virus, but this is funny shit. You got to see it. I'll find it and post it here in the space. It's so funny.
I didn't. Sarah, please check the group DM.
I'm just looking at some of the tweets around this. Like, there's one woman who said she's clarified it with RFK Jr. She said, "I'm severely disappointed that this headline, be a Jew combating real anti-Semitism, this was not it. He clarified with me this morning that he was discussing ethnic bioweapons and merely stated the Cleveland Clinic study showed that SARS-CoV-2 affects certain ethnicities more than others, number one being people of African descent. It is least compatible with Finns and Ashkenazi Jews." This is what he said, was spun by the media. I don't know if that's what he meant, then honestly, which I can give him benefit of the doubt, then it's not, well, I'm like Doc, I don't think it was, it could have been a bioweapon that was being developed, so I don't.
I wanted to
you're 100%
say
right.
really quickly,
Go ahead,
thank you, Lev, that I'm going to close the space here in about 10 minutes. So we're going to wrap up with some final thoughts because I'm tired. We've been going for a long time. So I'll get to you, Lori, Tyrone, and then we'll shuffle through for some final thoughts. Go ahead, Lori.
Great. Well, I'm tired too. My goodness, we've gone, almost 6 hours? Wow. It's amazing, you guys. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me to represent Team Kennedy. And I've enjoyed talking with each and every one of you and hearing your thoughts. And it's been a really, really good time. If anybody would like to help us out and volunteer and join the Kennedy campaign, just check out my Twitter profile. There's a pinned tweet at the top with a link where you can sign up to join our volunteer army. We're going to take back this country.